millimeters of a good binocular should have at least 16 to 22 millimeters of eye relief, and it's very important to have enough to accommodate not only your eyes, but if you happen to require the requirement of let's say utilizing corrective lenses like glasses in order to view, you want to be on the high side of that for sure. The exit-pupil is the diameter of the light cone or cylinder that's entering our pupil into our eye before we form an image, and the diameter of that has subtle nuances, and I wanted to address this just very briefly. It's because of the utility of a binocular. We're not always in a situation where we're fully dark adapted. We may look at dawn and dusk observing, we may look at the moon looking at a lunar occultation, and so we may not necessarily always have a fully dilated pupil. It's very important to think about that when you're choosing a pair, because quite often you won't necessarily be fully dark adapted. But even if you were, there's a huge disparity. Actually, Gary Saronic in his website actually talks a lot about this, and he's got a good covering on his web page. This slide is not taken from his site, by the way. I just wanted to put this up while you're looking at that and copying it down. A fully dark adapted pupil versus, or dilated pupil versus age. This is quite typical in a lot of studies. There's a huge variance, and it has a lot to do with a wide range of factors. The only general curve that you can draw from this or a conclusion is that somewhere around our mid to late teens, we have an apex where we're widest adapted, and then anything beyond that, it starts to slowly slope off. But it will vary depending on the individual and a lot of other factors. Suffice it to say, instead of using a 7 millimeter pupil, if I pick something more intermediate, I can accommodate over a wider illumination range, a larger population well into your senior years and maybe even beyond. So this is usually a better bet if you're looking at one type of binocular for astronomy. Now, the other thing that's very important here is you also want to have a balance of sharpness, largest practical pupil, image brightness, and comfort, and other things. Just like those folks that do wide field astrophotography with fast lenses, if you stop down your lens a little bit, you actually get a sharper view. Same thing here, by using the inner portion of our lens rather than the entire lens in an open pupil, we'll actually avoid some of the aberrations that happen in our eyes as well. So really that 5, we'll say 4 to 6 range is almost ideal for most observers in general. To calculate the exit pupil, just a reminder, you divide your magnification into the objective diameter. So you take the second number and divide it by the first number, and that'll give you your exit pupil in millimeters. Now, a lot of people ask me, what's the best binocular to use for astronomy? And it really depends on how you're planning on using it. But the one on the left here, the 8x40 class, I recommend as sort of the lowest size range versus 7x35, only because it grabs a little bit more light. And on average, you'll get darker, like dig darker into the sky than you would with a smaller pair. This is still sufficiently small so that if you have small children or grandchildren, they can easily still hold an instrument like this. And you still have a generous pupil size, and it has a wide enough field to really enjoy. The 10x50 is a good workhorse that many people are familiar with. And as a general all-round binocular, that's an excellent choice because it's both portable and still highly adaptable, but you can still mount it onto a tripod very easily. The reason I picked the one on the right here as another choice, 15 to 16 times 70, is because if you had to pick one binocular only to use for astronomy, even though I've got some large instruments and I also have these smaller instruments as well, the 70 millimeter class instrument kind of hits a sweet spot to dig deep enough under the sky that you're starting to see things closer to a telescopic view, and the 15 to 16 power allows you a little bit larger magnification. These have to be usually mounted. It's hard to hold those with your hands, and just be mindful of that if you decide to go that route. But that would be a sort of a one-trick pony for all purposes. A lot of people ask me how deep these binoculars can see when employing under the night sky. There's a lot of variables that you have to account for. Experience of the observer is one in some cases, in eye health. How dark the background sky is as well has a huge impact, as well as even the nature of the object you're looking at. But as a general rule, if we first of all look at the role of magnification, this is often underappreciated in binoculars. If I use the same objective size here, you can see the difference between a 10 and 7 power binocular. because as I magnify an image, same thing in a telescope, you darken the background sky substantially. So therefore, I actually enhance the contrast of the objects I'm looking at. I do have a trade-off with a larger image scale here, being able to see finer detail with the trade-off of not having quite as wide a field of view, but that's usually a good trade-off in the long run. And there's no doubt in my mind that a 10 by 50 will have some advantages, certainly when you're trying to employ it in the night sky, and that's why it's a popular size format. Now, I wrote a spreadsheet that I'll eventually be putting on the Binocular Observers group, and it uses some median curves for calculating exit pupil with age and so on. And just to address this, like if I have an 8 by 42 versus a 7 by 50, you can see there's not much of a difference there, 0.1 magnitude roughly, which is still significant. But when I consider the difference in size, that's not very large. And the 7 by 50, some people like versus a 10 by 50. But you can see here how an 8 by 42 gives it a good run for its money, especially if you're a middle-aged observer. Certainly the 10 by 50 pair does have a significant advantage over both of them. And again, this is another reason why that's a very popular size. If I go to something like a late 20, early 30s observer, which is probably close to the median range as we're approaching with new members now, you can see this difference here is still significant, but not that huge. But yet I still have a significant difference between a 10 and 7 by 50 pair in this example. And of course, I've also put the 16 by 70 in and a couple of my binocular telescopes in just for reference. So suffice it to say, a 50 millimeter class instrument, you should expect to be in the low to mid 4 magnitude of gain versus a naked eye view. Now, the important thing to remember is there's two different types of binoculars, and the optical configuration is very important when you're employing them under the night sky. Both of them have prisms. The roof prism ones are the straight through barrel types. They're usually in the smaller ranges, less than 60 millimeter, mainly because the barrels will interfere with each other if you're trying to get too close together when you're viewing with them. The Boro prism is a more general use binocular, and taking the prisms out of the equation, you can see here how we also have slightly more optical elements in the roof prism to get a good view in them. And so therefore, generally speaking, all things being equal, a Poro will edge out a roof prism unless you're looking at very high-end, very expensive optics. Now, binocular coatings are very important as well. And in general, as a rule, the deeper the coatings, the better the binocular and the better care that was taken in maximizing light transmission. And this has huge implications when you're using a binocular. I don't have time to get into all the nuances today, but I thought I'd just mention that the reason that we need to have optical coatings in general is to reduce light reflection off the air to glass surface due to the change in refractive index. And the better transmission that we get, after all, we're using these to capture light, we want them to go to our eyes. Any lost light on let's say a lesser coated optic will end up scattering around. Some of it will reflect out, some of it will reflect internally and reduce the contrast of the instrument. You can see here, even a single layer coating is better than no coating at all, but fully multi-coated optics have a huge advantage here. Pardon me. Another thing that's very important is prism materials, and I'm not going to get too heavy into this. Most of the better binoculars use BAK4 prisms. It has better optical characteristics, including less attenuation or light absorption, as well as its optical properties tend to yield a slightly better image when you're employing them in an instrument. The BK7 is usually used in budget binoculars, and quite often they're undersized. You can see on the left-hand pupil there, it tends to be diamond-shaped. This is very important because if you have a non-round pupil, it's actually losing light. And this is an example of a budget bino from a club member, and he sent me his shot through with his iPhone. You can see here how I have a square pupil versus a round one. Automatically by area, if I'm going under a fully dark adapted condition under the sky, I'm going to lose 20% of the light or more, actually 22, and that's not counting anything else. That has to do with the relative area of the optic there, so or the optical cone coming out. Also, this is not very heavily multi-coated, so you will get additional light losses as well. Does this mean it's not a good optic for astronomy? Absolutely not. Any binocular is good compared to a naked eye view. However, you just have to be mindful of the some of the quality variances that happen on budget binoculars, and you usually get what you pay for up to a certain point. Now I'm going to post this for a moment and just talk about how much a binocular cost. One of our club members asked if I could post this, and he was the one that had the that image there. It's very important to remember that anything below $100 or so, there are serious compromises coming about. If you can spend between 130 and say 300 on the upper end, anywhere in that regime, you're getting a quality binocular on average. It will depend on the manufacturer and other things, but generally speaking, more care is being taken into the construction. And obviously, as you go to more expensive, up to a point, you're actually getting better optics all the way along, just like in telescopes as well. Okay, so I'm going to move on here. Sorry if I went too quickly, but it's important to consider that when you're getting a binocular. Now, it's no wonder that quite often with inferior optical quality with budget pairs, or people that are buying them that don't know, and it's not their fault, they buy a pair that might be used for birding or something else. A lot of people will consider this sort of an entry-level type of instrument, or an in-between halfway to a telescope view. But I think you can see, if you, I've already addressed some of the advantages with a binocular. If you get a good pair, it actually is a serious instrument that can be used for many years, and even experienced observers can avail themselves of the advantages. Especially when you get into larger pairs, the bridge between a binocular field of view and a telescopic wide field of view starts to narrow quite a bit, and you'll find that in some cases, most of the objects that are available in a moderate aperture wide field telescope is also available in a binocular as well. Now, I'd like to take time to just cover a few things I alluded to with the image circle. This is a 6-degree field of view. And this is one of the nice things when you're learning the sky. I do talk about star hopping, and we will cover that more with some of our binocular group sessions as well. But if you look at, let's say, the Square of Pegasus, which is a prominent asterism and part of a constellation, by the way, almost due south, fairly high up now this time of year, you can walk along the lower stars here, and you can actually see, can my mouse be seen here as I'm moving it? Can you guys see that? Anybody comment quickly?
No.
Yes, just thumbs up or something.
Yes,
or
now
something.
it is.
No. So if you go from this top left corner star and walk your way down, this star here, Merak, is the next brightest star to the corner star. You can walk yourself up very easily using the binoculars. You just move it up a bit, and there's a second star, and you can walk yourself right up to the Andromeda Galaxy, and that's the brightest galaxy because it's the largest close one to us, and it's a nice showpiece, and it frames really nicely in binoculars. Another nice asterism is the coat hanger here, and you can Altair in the summertime. This is the lowest star of the 3 that make up the summer triangle. You can walk your way up along here in an arc, if you will. That's one way to go. You could also just go to the wing of Aquila, the eagle, and just a little over binocular field of view. This will show up like a sore thumb. It's a very prominent asterism, but it's a really neat one to look at with binoculars. The double cluster is a showpiece in the night sky, and we're very fortunate to have it. It's 2 very condensed star clusters in the same area, and it's really prominent, even though we're in the Milky Way here with a lot of other star clusters around. You can either find it by going down the W of Cassiopeia, a little over a binocular field of view, or you can go up from Perseus and move up like this. And again, there's different ways to employ a star hopping technique, whichever way works for you. But this particular cluster shows up very well, and it's really lovely in binoculars. Going back to Altair, if you want to walk down the Eagle, you can actually get to Scutum the Shield. M11, the Wild Duck cluster, shows up really nicely as well. And again, it doesn't take very long to just move in binocular field hops to get to there very quickly. And you'll note here, Scutum would actually fit into a larger field of view than 6 degrees. You'd almost get the entire constellation in that one, which is kind of interesting. Another series of objects that really avail themselves of advantages with binocular observing because of the low power wide field are low surface brightness objects like M51 and M33. M51 can be found now usually in the mid-evening. The Big Dipper's to the northeast, and if you look at the bend in the handle, there's a multiple star called Alcor, and then Mizar is its companion as well. You can see this in the field of view of a decent optical bino. of good quality. And you can either walk down to Alcade and drop down, or you can just hop over and look for this triangular little group of stars here and put it at the one field edge, and there's M51. It won't jump out at you like M31, the Andromeda Galaxy, but if you have this mounted and you look for a period of time, you'll start to really see it pop out of the darker sky if you're not observing from a bright urban center. The Sombrero Galaxy is another one. It looks like you have a dark dust lane in there, and it's a little smaller, but you can find it in the spring skies. Spica, or Spica, depending on how you want to pronounce it, is just below Arcturus in the spring. And Corvus, you just basically go slightly southwest to the constellation of Corvus, and you see these two brighter stars here. Delta Corvi, you can launch and just walk your way up. This little asterism here actually acts like a little arrow pointer right to the galaxy. And again, these are the fun things you can do with these binoculars very easily with the wide fields of view. Planets are also another wonderful way to experience binocular observing, especially daytime and dawn-dusk viewing, and that's often where they're employed. Obviously, a larger binocular will show the planet much larger, and you'll get a bigger disk. You can actually see in like 20 times 80 millimeter and above, banding in Jupiter starts to show up, as well as Saturn's rings are resolved. But even Venus here, we've got an event, I won't steal Bryan's thunder today. As we go through what do they call it? Sorry, inferior conjunction, you'll actually be able to see the crescent Venus get thinner and thinner, and it's really nice to follow. Even watching the Galilean satellites is a lot of fun. Occultations as well with the moon when it's covering stars, or in this case, the Mercury occultation with larger binoculars, 70 millimeters and above, was a really neat thing to look at last month. It was a really tough one to do, but I was able to pull it off, so it was kind of fun. One important thing to remind oneself when you've got a pair of binoculars is to mark it for infinity focus, and it's really important that you just use some kind of a marker. I use modeling paint with a small toothpick, and you just put it on, and that way you can always get to infinity focus in your key settings right away. So that way, if you're sharing the view, you can avoid having to fiddle around with them too much. These are the important criteria to consider for binoculars, and I'll just review them very briefly. Fully multi-coated optics, decent eye relief, a generous exit pupil, and definitely you want to consider anything like an accessory like a chair or tripod or parallelogram down the road for getting the best views possible. Things to avoid are like unknown name brands that have weird sounding names on Amazon, ruby coatings, zoom types, super blowout deals. Often you'll get an inferior optic, and these are some of the ones up top, like poor mechanical construction and minimal coatings, or truncated pupils, or things you want to avoid for sure. If you're not sure, ask some of our members. Scott's got a lot of experience, and he's of course at the planetarium, and they offer great advice to a number of people. And you can ask myself, and we have some other members that are really good with binoculars in general. So if you're not sure, please consult with us. We'll hopefully get you squared away. These trusted brands, I mean, some of these are higher end, like Fujinon and Canon. Nikon makes a great range of sport optics over a wide range. This is by no means a comprehensive list, of course, but their sport optics are exceptionally good for a wide range of price points. I'm just about done, Dennis. I know I'm getting close to my time limit. I apologize. I think I had an extra 2 minutes because we were getting set up. So I hope you can accommodate me there. I'll have to rifle through the rest of this really quick. These two brands are also very good because they just focus on binoculars. APM makes the Lunt brand as well, and they make exceptionally good instruments, and they test each individual one coming out. I just wanted to mention that for those that are interested in looking at overwork, they do have a website, and we do get, when you use the SCIF certificate checkout, you can actually save the GST. They're a little bit more expensive for shipping because they don't have Canadian dealers, but I just thought I'd let everybody know that that is an available option for them. I'm obviously running short, but I'll just quickly mention there are several ways to mount binoculars. These are 3 options here that are very nice. It's very important to get, if you're going to get a tripod, get one that has enough loading for the binocular. You don't necessarily have to get to 13 kilograms unless you're mounting heavy binos. Another option is like what Robin did here with his homemade parallelogram mount. That's another very affordable option, and his works really well even for his larger binos as well. Really slick. Chair is also another option for those of you that want to do binocular astronomy. So again, I'd just like to ask you whether you'd like to be somebody that has to fiddle around with a telescope or have difficulty waiting to find something, or do you want to just be out at the ready? This is the fun factor with binoculars. Probably the best book to buy for binocular astronomy is this Binocular Highlights, and it has a whole range of very wonderful objects, 109 really nice showpieces. It runs about $45 Canadian. You can get it at Sky and Telescope. Great thing to have at the handy to be able to learn the night sky and some really nice binocular goodies. I'm not going to get too heavily into this. This is another site that I recommend that you check out. My friend Stephen Tonkin in the UK has been doing binocular outreach in England for over 4 decades, and he's written a really nice book that covers a lot of stuff on binoculars as well. So whether you decide to go with a handheld pair and you just really enjoy the night sky, just standing up and viewing that way, or if you decide to mount them down the road, I'd like to say that I think you're going to find you're doubling your fun under the stars. Thank you very much. And I don't know if we have time for any questions at all, but please feel free if there is maybe a sliver of time. I didn't want to hog the time. It's hard to squeeze this in. Dennis?
Well, we really don't have much time just because we're not sure how long it'll take for the business part of the meeting.
So I'll tell you what, those of you that do have questions, I gave my email address, dhennig2@shaw.ca. I'll just put that up at the front here again here in a sec. dhennig2@shaw.ca, or go on to the Binocular Observers group and ask away, and I'll be happy to address those then. Okay, thanks guys. Sorry I got a little carried away there with the talk. I wanted to cover that a little better, and I did practice, but there's just a lot of information to cover. Back to you.
The other thing that they can do is if they want to in the chat, Darren, they could send you a chat question on the chat as well. Okay. And so you can stop sharing now if you don't mind.
Okay, I will.
I just want to thank you very much, Darren. And again, as he said, if you're interested in learning more about binocular observing, please join them with the Binocular Interest Group. And we've also recently approved picking up a parallelogram that can be lent out with our loaner scope, or loaner scope. Look at that, saying it too much. We have loaner binoculars available now to expand. So if you don't have binoculars, the club now has loaner binoculars available, so you can join the Binocular Interest Group if you like, and we can get you started. All right, so I'm gonna set up. I'm just gonna mention, Ed, you might want to take Darren off as a co-host so he'll be able to vote on the polls when we get to that point as a member, because otherwise you can't vote. So I'm going to try and share my screen now.
Okay, I'll do that. Thanks.
Oh, I hate when it does that. Can't get to my slideshow. All right. Can you see my slides? I can't get them to start as a slideshow. Oh, wait, maybe. There we go. All right. Yep. So again, just thank you to Darren for the binocular observing. So tonight's meeting, get together. So we had the beginner session. I'm going to go over some announcements in a moment. I will have a special meeting to order afterwards for a bylaws vote. After that, we'll have what's up with Bryan, what's new with Dr. Michelle Boyce. If there's time, we'll have a break, and then our main presentation from Dr. Yvonne Alcorn. And then afterwards, our usual virtual get together. I am tongue-tied tonight. Okay, so there is a business meeting portion to tonight's meeting, and that's to vote on our bylaws tonight. I will go over some details in a minute, but you must be a member in good standing to be able to vote. What that means is your dues are paid up, and that's primarily what it means. Just an announcement again, a reminder that with the St. Malo Spring event is in the last week in April. If you want to volunteer, you can. The council has made the decision to move forward because we do have a lot of volunteers, if not all the positions filled. But you never know, you can always volunteer for some more if you want. So look for some more information coming. Our Telescope for Kids holiday giveaway has been successful. We've got 20 names that submitted for some of the scopes. And we have a committee that is reviewing the submissions and will make their decision, and that will be announced shortly. If there's time, we'll have some breakout room tonight, just to socialize a little bit. And we are also public events, and thank you, missed that one. We're volunteers. We're looking for a meeting coordinator who is just going to help organize the meeting and make sure speakers are in place, those sorts of things, as well as a volunteer coordinator to work with, or when we have outreach events and different types of public outreach events, as well as center events. If you would like to be a presenter at the meeting, please volunteer and let one of the council members know, and we will certainly get you set up in the schedule. Loner scope coordinator, as I mentioned, binoculars are now available, and in short order, there will be a parallel, they will be mounted with a parallelogram. So nominations are still open for the elections in January meeting. If you would like to nominate somebody to be on the council, please let Bryan Stach know, as he is the chairman of the nominating committee. Award nominations for both the center as well as national are still open till the end, till December 31st. Please submit any names to either Bryan Stach or to a council member. RASC calendars are available now, and they'll be $15 a piece. Please contact Abdul, the treasurer. When members observing night, tentatively planned for tomorrow night, depending on what the weather is. If it's canceled because weather or observing is not suitable, an email will go out onto the RASC list, but it will start probably around 6:30. All right, so without further ado, I will call a special business meeting to order to deal with a bylaw vote. But I want to just first preface this a little bit to let you know what started all this is the center is hoping to do a lot more in the future. And if the bylaws are passed tonight, the next step in the new year with the new council will be to incorporate. The reason it's a totally new bylaw is that when we did research, there is no record of any bylaws ever being approved either at national or that we could find. So they're from scratch. These bylaws were also written to be in compliance with both national bylaws as well as Manitoba Corporations Act, because eventually that's where we would be incorporated with. Just a really big thank you to all the members of this year's current board. It was and several volunteers who took the time to read them, provide us good feedback. It was a lot of work, a long process, but we're pleased to present them tonight for review. So the way the bylaw is going to vote, I'm just going to point out the way it works. We're going to use polls, and the only people who are members of the center can vote. People that are, you're on there now, your names are being checked, you may be contacted. If you've just got a name or a short form thing, you'll need to identify yourself to us so that we know you're a member, because the membership list, everybody's names are being compared to the membership list at this point. So if you've got, oh, where's the name? So there's a Zoom user listed. We need to know who you are, okay? If for some reason the poll doesn't work, or we're unable to identify all the people who could vote, or for some reason there's more vote, I don't know how that could happen, more votes than people on, but we've got an alternate plan, and that will be, it'll take some time. We'll get everybody, when we do all in favor or all opposed, we'll ask for your hands to go up. So, and it'll take us a moment because we'll have to go through and look at each person. So there is an alternate should we need to, all right? The other thing is, because I'm a co-host and Ed's a co-host, we can't show votes. So if there should be a tie, Ed and I would then make known our votes. So everybody understand that? If you got a real heartache with that, let me know now. Please. I'm just going to check. I see a bunch of chat things. It'll just take me 1 minute, please. I think they're just. Scott, thanks for sharing the link to the RASC there where the login. Of course, fortuitous, a couple of days before we do this, even though it's been there, I know a lot of people do that, the day before you go and look, but thank you for sharing that, Scott, so people have some time to pull them up. And yeah, it looks like this is all questions for Darren. Okay, so I just wanted to check that. Sorry about the delay. So just bear in mind that there are potentially 2 votes that could be added at the end if required, because we can't, using the poll, I can't show it. If we do the show of hands, then everybody will see where we vote at that time. Because we have 44 people potentially who could speak, we limit it to a person who wants to speak for or against, doesn't matter, 2 minutes. Then there's, somebody, if there's any response to that, and then they can respond one more for another minute. We've just got to limit it just because potentially that still could be 3 hours. So I don't expect it, but we have to have some sort of way of managing that should everyone choose to speak to the bylaws, the draft bylaws. What I'm going to do is I've already asked 2 council members to be the mover and seconder, just to start the formality, and then I will open it up. Please be patient because I got to scroll through 44 places to see a person if they got their hand up. If you're able to, it's a lot easier if you use the, what do they call that function where you can put your hand up, the yellow hand. I don't know if we've got it on this one. But
I think it's the reactions. It's the reactions.
It's the reaction. So if in the reactions, if you can put your hand up, it might be able to draw my attention a little quicker, but I only see 4 of you at a time. So on my screen, because I'm sharing my screen. So Gord, are you there? Gord Tulloch.
Yes, I am.
Yes, and I understand, Gord, you're going to make a motion to approve the bylaws as published on the RASC Winnipeg member site.
Yes, I so make that motion.
Thank you. And Ed Wright, I understand that you're going to second that motion.
Yes, I second the motion to adopt the new bylaws for the organization.
Thank you. All right, so we can formally discuss them now. So if you wish to discuss, again, we're going to limit it to 2 minutes. And again, that's just because if everybody chooses to talk to it, it will take a while. And I want to be able to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to talk to the bylaws. And we do have our guest speakers scheduled for 8:30. So if you do want to, just I'm going to start scrolling through here. Scott, I see, let me just finish scrolling. I've got Scott Young has his hand up. I just want to see if there's anybody else. So I got an idea of what I'm working with at the moment. And I know Scott is a member in good standing, so I don't see anybody else up, Scott. So please, Scott, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
Okay, start the timer.
Yeah.
Yeah. First, thanks to everybody that worked on this. I know that it's a grueling and thankless job to crank out these things. I think these are really well done and cover pretty much most of the issues that we would need from bylaws. The only concern that I have is probably just some language bits around the mandatory positions on council. We have like the president, vice president, treasurer, and secretary, and then all the other positions, the directors at large and councillors are maybe elected, and that basically means that you can have only 4 people on council, and a quorum is 2 people, and that seems like a very small group. Not in most circumstances, because I mean we've always had small groups of people doing things, and it's been fine. But you do occasionally, you don't write bylaws for the good times. You write bylaws for, when things are going south. And it just seems like there's not quite enough oversight of those potentially 2 or 3 people, other than waiting for the next election cycle to bring them in. I think there's also in the special meeting section, the 15 members can sign up a petition to request a special meeting to discuss something, but council has to approve that first. And if council is the problem, or the 1 or 2 people are the problem, that's unlikely to pass. So I just think that there could be a little bit more on the safeguard side here. And I only say that because both here in Winnipeg and in my time on national, we've seen situations where, people start with the best of intentions, everything works fine, then real life happens, people disappear due to, family illness or getting a new job or moving away or whatever. And suddenly you wind up with a quarter of the group that you thought you had, and then someone, just goes a little bit rogue. So I would like to see a few of those items strengthened in terms of the oversight. Now, I do have specific changes that I would suggest. I don't know how you want to handle that kind of stuff, Dennis. Is an amendment an appropriate thing, or would you rather just discuss?
I would rather just discuss right now. And that was your first 2 minutes, which is good, and very good points there, Scott. Just a little bit of the reason those 4 positions were named is because by law, once we incorporate, we have to have those positions. So your observations are valid. I can't deny that. You could be in a situation where only 4 people were there, but that responsibility would lie with the organization, not the people that are elected. You have to understand that as an organization, the membership are responsible for the elections and who's elected. If only 4 people were elected, that is the will of the membership. Okay? And I agree that your scenario could happen. I don't deny that. But the reality is, if that is the will of the membership, to only have 4 people come forward to stand for election, right? That's the will of the organization, not the will of those individuals. It could go south. I cannot say it would never happen. I understand that, Scott. So that's why they're written that way. If rather than get into amendments tonight, because everybody wouldn't have time to review them, an option is to, if there's a way of building and protection, I would suggest that you in particular, because you seem to have an idea, submit a suggestion on how we could change that. Like the bylaws, we know are going to have to be amended as we go, because as we work with them, we're going to find things that we want to tweak or do different or add. So that's just my 2 cents on that. And you have time to come back. So.
Okay. I think you're right. If we decided as a group that we only wanted 4 people, that would be fine. I think the more likely situation is we decided we wanted 12 people and 8 of them disappeared. And now a quorum of those 4 people is 2 people. And then all of those decisions are in that situation. So I agree, it's unlikely, but I thought it was unlikely when it happened in Winnipeg, and I thought it was unlikely when it happened at the national level. And it's not necessarily a malicious thing, but you suddenly get situations that come into place, and having a way for the membership to say, hey, maybe we should have a new election because the mandate that was given has suddenly changed and the direction has changed, and we should be able to do this. That has been taken away from the membership by the special meeting rules, because council has to approve a special meeting. That's essentially a conflict of interest where council gets to investigate itself. And so that's kind of why I'm making those suggestions. Anyway, I've put suggested wording in the chat. People can look at it, or we can deal with it down the way. So, sorry if I could just respond to. Okay, sorry. Go ahead.
Sorry, just so everybody knows, I got to go over and look at what's in the chat. So 1 minute here. So.
I will say that I did send in my proposed changes earlier in the process, and for whatever reason they didn't get in. So that's a difference of direction. That's fine. That's what we vote on. But I personally, at this point right now, am very concerned that once we enact these bylaws, the ability to change them is also held by council. And if we run into that situation where a number of council members become inactive or disappear, or there are personality conflicts or whatever, then we're kind of hooped, because the only people that will be allowed to change the rules are the people that don't want them changed. So anyway, that's all I'll say. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott. So again, everyone, just give me a minute, please, because I need to read through the comments. Okay, so just so everybody knows, the intent was not to get into amendments tonight, to be very honest, because it was published and intended. So there is a way to, should they be approved, be amended. And Scott's made some good points and with a few suggestions. And again, because of time, I'm not really open to, because we never received anything since they've been published on the website.
That's not true, Mr. President.
I believe your stuff was sent in before that, wasn't it?
I've sent in a couple of rounds of commentary.
Yeah, and we've incorporated some of them.
I don't think they've been reviewed by council, Dennis. Well, I haven't reviewed any changes from Scott.
I have similar
this
concerns. I have similar concerns as Scott, that once this has got through, it'll be difficult to change.
Okay.
So I think it's important it's looked at before it's completely ratified.
Now,
These amendments.
Yeah,
That's
who was
Michelle.
speaking before you, Michelle? Just, you need to identify yourself. So,
Okay, Michelle.
no, I know that, but before you, Michelle.
That was Gord.
Gord, okay.
So yeah, from my perspective, and speaking as a member here, like, these were published months ago. If there were suggested amendments that weren't considered by council, then they need to go back to council. They need to be considered by council. There needs to be a response that is publicly provided to the membership, and they need to be either incorporated or rejected with a reason before we can ratify these bylaws. These changes are significant enough that we have to think about them, as opposed to simply reject them or accept them on the fly in this meeting.
Yeah,
right?
and again, the entire membership is not present, whereas the written document is on the website in the member section.
Oh, absolutely, right.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
this should have been pro forma, and that's why we published them so long ago. If there's input that was provided that hasn't been considered by council, it needs to go to council.
So Michelle speaking, I think this should be tabled to the next meeting.
I agree.
Okay, just finishing looking at these. Okay, so we have who's making the motion? Michelle?
Yes.
And Gord, did you second that motion to table?
I'll second the motion.
Any discussion on the motion to table? Scott, I see your hand up. Is that? to this-
No, sorry, that was from before. I'll take it down.
Okay, and Russell Brown, I see your hand up.
Yeah, I obviously I'm a new member, so to be honest, I haven't reviewed the bylaws. I sort of wasn't here during the whole implementation of it, I guess. But what I'm just curious of is, like, I've been part of several organizations that have like unions and military messes and all that kind of stuff. And is there a way for members to table motions during meetings, or does that have to be a special meeting as far as the bylaws are concerned?
Well, technically, because there's no bylaws, there's no rules.
I understand that, yeah, but
Right,
I
so
wasn't
that's
sure
what-
sort of how the norm has been
Yeah.
so far.
Yeah, so
Well-
the only, traditionally, just for history, real quick, if everybody will just benefit since we have a new member. We normally have one official meeting a year, and that's the AGM, to be fair. Traditionally, that's what's happened. The council meets as regularly as they need to. The current council for the last year has met monthly. As a council, there were working groups working on strategic plans and the amendments and those sorts of things. So, just so you know that that's how it works. So, and again, in the bylaws, there's processes for how meetings will be run and things like that. So, and how
Yeah.
members can bring things forward for discussion.
Well, I'll definitely take a read of that and maybe add some suggestions, having a little bit of experience in sort of
Michelle Boyce speaking.
Yeah, just
Usually
a second. Michelle, just please, we need to work through. I just got to see who's there first so everybody gets a chance. So Russell, are you done?
yeah, I was just curious on how that would be handled. But,
Okay, and sorry, Michelle, I think you're next up. I just got to double check here, okay?
Yeah, I was just following up with that. Typically, the default is Robert's Rules of Order. But that being said, people usually use a watered down version,
Okay,
which
so
is
we
what I
have,
assume we're doing.
yes, we have, especially since we don't have bylaws. So we have a mover and second to table the motion. Is there any further discussion? All in favor, please hold your hand up and wait for a second so I can take a peek.
Visually or the hand icon? thing?
Either one, because most people have their camera turned off, which is not making it easy for me.
It's just the reactions button down at the bottom. You can just hit that and then press raise your hand.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like about a dozen. Those opposed to tabling. Yeah, for those that have your hands up, take them down. It's a lot easier when everybody's in the same room. So the motion is, there is at least one opposed. The motion is carried. So the bylaws are now tabled, and the council will take it back and review it. Whether it's going to be available for, in fact, well, it's possible. It's possible. I can't make a commitment that it'll be available at the next meeting because there's some requirements. We have to post them a minimum of 30 days before a vote can be taken. So it'll probably be in the new year, and it will be the new council's responsibilities to deal with after the AGM. It would likely be discussed at the, oh geez. So no, it'll be in the February meeting. Just so everybody understands the timelines, like the best case scenario would be the February, because the changes have to be written, reviewed, accepted, and written by the council. They need to be posted, and a minimum of 30 days before the meeting is held, a notice goes out to the membership. So go ahead, Scott.
Sorry, I was just going to say, normally when you table a meeting or table a motion, it's on the table until someone moves to bring it off the table. So you can leave it there till whenever.
Yeah. Okay. And I'm just trying to give people an idea of when to expect, because again, the purpose behind having approved bylaws is so we'll be able to use those when we submit for incorporation. To try and take advantage of some grant money that you got to be incorporated for. Catch 22. Good. There's no further discussion on that. Then we're going to move on. Just got to check my time. And thank you very much, everyone.
Dennis,
Hmm.
Dennis, it's Robin Clark.
Sorry, who?
Robin Clark.
Go ahead.
I know the motion's now been tabled, but just for everybody's benefit, are you saying that the executive is open to hearing additional comments?
We always have been.
Okay. Yep. I just wanted to make that clear because I had started reviewing the bylaws a while back and then put them aside because of other issues going on.
Yep.
And didn't get any comments back to you. So if you're still open to hearing other comments, I will take the time to read through them, and if there's anything other than what I've heard this evening, I'll submit them.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And like Scott raised a point and had some suggestions. So again, those will be looked at for possible incorporation, and hopefully that they do address those concerns, because it's a absolute worst case scenario, but likely. I didn't have time to really study them, to be honest with you, reading through them to see what we have, what all comments were there. Just
Okay,
before we go,
thank you.
Sorry?
That's good. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that you were still open, the executive was still open to hearing additional comments besides what was presented this evening.
Oh, yeah. Yep. And they've been posted probably at least 4 months and discussed at 2 meetings.
Yeah, no, I'm aware of that. I live remotely, so I don't dial in all the time.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
It's 8 o'clock.
All right. So any other thoughts or comments?
In case there's something that maybe at 8 that you want to watch, I don't know.
All right. Well, then what we're going to do.
Someone's mic is on.
Yeah. Oh, just check the chat before I move on. All right. So we'll now have Bryan for what's up. Bryan Stach, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Thank you, Dennis. Let me just, I got my share screen. Sorry, Dennis, can you disable my, so I can enable my sharing?
Oh, sorry, that's me. Hang on. Give me a minute. Here you go, Bryan. Should be okay. Sorry about that.
Perfect, thank you. All right, let's get this. Okay, and bye. Okay, so, oops. Let's try this again. Sorry about that. There we go. What's up for tonight's guy in December? We do have a few things that's happening, especially for that comet Leonard. I'm going to use my space bar. Okay, let's talk about a little bit about the planets. Unfortunately, some of the planets, especially Jupiter and Saturn, they're going to be less visible. They're only going to be visible during the evening. So I want to get rid of the screen here. Okay, so oh, advanced a little too much there. Okay, so I'm going to have to.
The Bryan show again.
Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. It just went a little too fast. There we go. And then there and there. Okay, Mars. Okay, so Mars is going to be only the planet that's going to be visible during the morning. Venus will be visible in the evening, especially in the southwest, but it'll make itself, it'll make its way up through the month. Mercury is only going to be visible during December the 28th and 29th. It's going to be 4 degrees south of Venus. Like I was saying earlier, only Jupiter and Saturn are visible in the evening only, and Saturn would be a little dimmer than Jupiter. Okay, so this is what's happening for December events. We do have a couple of meteor showers. Unfortunately, one's going to be washed out with the moon, especially on December 22nd. Gemini is still watchable, but unfortunately, I'll explain more about that later. It would be after 3 o'clock. We do have a single transit of Jupiter or as a shadow of the moon. It's already happened. Sorry? Okay.
Could everyone make sure your microphones are muted, please?
Okay, thanks, Dennis. Okay, so I want to explain a little bit more about the winter solstice. If you're new to the Astronomy Club and what's it all about, officially December 21st, it's going to be the official day of winter, the first day of winter. Sun will be at the lowest point in the sky, and this is going to mark the longest night of the year. Afterwards, the days will grow longer. It also comes from two Latin words, one meaning sun and the other to stand still. Next, okay, the Gemini meteor shower is happening this 14th. It's going to be the pre-dawn, December the 14th. The moon's going to set at 2:52 a.m. So anytime after 3 o'clock, which is really a good time to view the meteor shower, would be a good time to have a look at it. It's supposed to be quite good. You know, they're saying 150 per hour, but realistically, it might be only 5 or 10. But just get up and have a look at it to see what's going to happen. The other one, Earth's meteor shower, unfortunately, because the moon is going to wash it out, it's going to be 90% illuminations. It's in the constellation Ursa Minor, but it's going to peak, of course, December 22nd. But unfortunately, the moon's going to be up. I want to talk a little bit about the comet Leonard. I've been asking a lot of members lately about, was it naked eye observing? I just got confirmation just now, thanks to Scott, that some members did see it naked eye. But unfortunately, it's going to be low, especially in the evening and in the later part of the morning, about 5:30, I believe, it's going to start to rise back up again. But if it's too faint for you, make sure you have some good binoculars or a telescope. A good astronomer should always have a good binoculars kicking around. But from experience, comets are pretty much unpredictable. You just never know about the magnitude. It could change at any time, but just keep watching it. So December the 12th is going to be the closest approach to Earth. So in the next couple of days. Okay, thanks to Sheila. I asked for permission to use her photographs, and her photographs are always nice. You can see here, this is the comet Leonard, otherwise known as C/2181. I believe this is supposed to be M3, I believe, in this corner here. There's a wider shot and there's a close-up shot of the comet, but it's quite photographical. Next, for the Milky Way, right now it is directly overhead. So it's your good chance if you want to take some photographs of it. The Milky Way is directly overhead of us. Over here, I don't know if you see my mouse, we do have Orion. It's already starting to rise right now. And of course, we do have some of the winter constellation, Gemini. And I don't see it here. Taurus is it's going to be rising too. Okay, unfortunately, this has already happened, but I should mention it. We do have, like I said, the transit or the moon on Jupiter that happened earlier this evening. But unfortunately, it's already over, but just let you know that it's quite a nice event if you're able to see it. What else do I have here? Okay, this is the comment. This is what I'm trying to show you here. Tomorrow, I set this tomorrow. This is the online about Solarium. If you can see here in this, right up here, just above the west here, and this is what, about 5:30, you can see the comet will start to rise, but it's going to quickly go back down again. It doesn't stay up for very long. That's tomorrow. So my mission is basically tomorrow. Hopefully, I will be able to get some pictures or have it, have a look at visually. Now for tomorrow, this is actually later on this evening at 5:30. you can see the comet will still start to rise just above the east, but it will make its way up a little bit just before the sunset or the sunrise on the morning of Saturday. But I'm hoping with members night we might be able to catch it then, but we'll have to wait to see. The weather does look promising tomorrow. I'll explain more about what's going on for the next 10 days. Now, some of the things I want to do mention about the winter constellation, because I'm always favor for Orion. Orion's right now is starting to rise as we speak. We do have the winter constellation Canis Major, Taurus, and Gemini as some of the winter constellations. But my favorite one has always been Orion, especially with M42. Just like Darren with his binoculars, it's a really good binocular object to look at. If you have a telescope, it'll resolve even better. All right, so on December the 31st, I have here the conjunction. We have the moon. We do have a crescent moon here. We do have Mars early in the morning and Arcturus the star. So the pre-dawn of December 31st, if you're up, it'd be a nice event to have a look at. As I illustrate here, it's going to be around 7 o'clock in the morning and still be pretty dark to have a look at it. Now let's talk about the weather. Well, it doesn't look very good. We do expect some snow here. In the upper region I have here, the temperature for tomorrow's observatory night, we do have it getting up to around -9, I believe. So right here we have 12 a.m. It's going to start to warm up a little bit tomorrow. As for cloud coverage down here, it is going to be quite clear. But for the rest of the week, it doesn't look very good. Next Saturday, we do have a little bit of cloud, but it might be clear enough to do some observing then. But in this graph right here, you can see we do expect some snow, but it's only going to be about 3 centimeters. Now, what's shocking about it, unfortunately, sometimes during the night, we do have some gusting winds. Especially tomorrow, we do have gusting winds around 20. So the wind, even though it's going to be around -9 or -9, the wind chill factor is going to make it -19 or make it feel like -19. As you can see here, on the morning of Wednesday or Thursday at 12 a.m., you can see that the winds are going to be quite high. Actually, they're going to be gusting up to 67 that night. So it's going to be pretty windy that night. All right, I think that's all I have to say for what's up for December. So you guys have a good evening.
Thank you very much, Brian. If you can stop sharing your screen, please. Thank you. And to talk about what's new, Dr. Michelle Boyce. And Ed just confirmed she has co-hosting.
I'm trying to find her.
Give me one second.
Okay,
Michelle,
I haven't
which
given it
name
to
are you
her.
under?
It's normally Susie, isn't it?
Oh, I corrected my name because someone was asking. It
Well, that
it switches
confused me.
back. Yeah, it switches back. Yeah. There were 2
Okay.
Michelles in one Zoom, so I put my name as Susie and it keeps switching back to that. So
Okay, you now have co-host.
Thanks, Ed.
okay. Just give me a second. Okay, so now I'll share. It's tricky dealing with 3 screens. Screen 2, because I never know where PowerPoint decides it wants to go, so I have to pre-run it. Okay, everyone see that? Oh, come on, it died?
Yes, yeah.
Oh, wait, the Zoom window's still there though, right? I'll try it again. Okay, so I've just decided to do one topic today, and I'm going to look at the dynamical evolution of active region filaments driven by magnetic reconnection on the sun. Yeah, I'm not going to go into that kind of detail. The abstract actually explains what I'm going to do, which is basically I'm going to introduce you to all these instruments and the concepts, and then get into what the paper's about. It's actually a very short paper, but I thought this would be interesting. So let's start off with the sun. So the sun consists of a core, and that's where the helium gets, hydrogen gets converted into helium. That's where everything happens. And then this is the radiative zone, which I forget how long it takes light to get out. It's like millions of years. It's so dense. And then this is the convective zone, where if you look on the surface of the sun, you'll see these granules, which are like when you have a pot of boiling water. That's what you see. And those are would fit 2 Earths inside a granule. So just to give you a sense of the size. So after the convective zone is the photosphere, which is what most people can see with their telescopes with a simple solar filter. And always I will express the caveat, as everyone else does, don't look at the sun with your telescope if you don't know what you're doing. Otherwise you'll burn your eyes out. Right, so back to this. So this is on the photosphere. And then we have the chromosphere, which is the upper part. And then there's a transition zone where you go from the chromosphere to the corona. And that's where a huge temperature rise occurs. So as far as humans go, we only have access with our instruments down to the photosphere. Okay, so we can see photosphere, chromosphere, transition zone, and solar corona, depending on the types of instruments we use. So for the amateur astronomer, you could get access to the solar sphere with a simple solar filter, or even those solar glasses, but make sure they're certified, or a Herschel wedge. Herschel wedge allows you to see a lot more granulation and detail. It's costs slightly more than a filter, maybe about twice as much for a low end, but you can see a lot of details. It's kind of cool. I haven't got one myself, but I wouldn't mind getting one at some point, but I have enough to keep me busy. So the other is the hydrogen alpha. And these are the different brands of telescopes, the Coronado, Beta, Lunt, and Quark. Quark is actually not a telescope, it's a thing you attach to your quark. Similar Beta has that too. So these are instruments that's accessible to the amateur. On a small side note, I've been watching people put up these gorgeous pictures of the Orion Nebula that stretch across the sky, and then I go, what equipment did you use? Then I price check and realize solar astrophotography is actually cheaper than doing that if you want the right camera, especially for wide field, high res. So that's an interesting side note. Okay, so now on to the scientists. What do they, well, there are so many platforms. In fact, the public also has access to these, but I'm just using the name scientist just to delineate the two for doing science. There's the GONG Global Oscillatory Network, which I love. Where are you? Yeah, I got those slides backwards. I have 2 slides mixed up. Never mind. Anyway, it's a website you can go to, and I usually go to Big Bear and I check to see what's going on before I take out my solar scope, because you can see all the little things happening here. And you can go back to any dates like a time machine, and you can run movies and all sorts of things, or you can get real data. Okay, so that's GONG. And in fact, the paper I'm going to talk about, they're using these facilities. Then there's the New Vacuum Telescope that's in China somewhere. And they have a really good high res, I believe it's 2 arc second to 1 arc second high res hydrogen alpha. To give you a sense of size, the red spot of Jupiter is 7.9 arc seconds. So you can see things like filaments, flares, and prominences. And these you can see with your own, with amateur equipment too that I just mentioned. Then there's this ultraviolet spectrometer. And here you can see in the chromosphere, chromosphere and the transition region, that's where it's sensitive to. So there's different kinds of chemistry going on and different kinds of light being emitted, that we have all these different instruments to try and examine the various aspects. And also the other hard thing is we're looking head on at the sun in general. Then there's the SDO Observer, Solar Dynamics Observatory, which is actually kind of cool. You can go there, it has high-res images, it has 10 different images for different bands. It has an extreme ultraviolet scope, a helioseismic magnetometer, and atmospheric imaging assembly. I'll talk about that in a minute. So here's the new solar vacuum telescope. Why is it called a vacuum telescope? Because the whole thing's in vacuum to prevent what amateur astronomers commonly known as tube currents. It's a big thing here because you have a lot of heat. Also, because it's an alt-az mount, I don't know if can people see me? Hold on. 1 second. Oh, I can't.
Yeah,
do
we can
anything
see
there.
your slides fine.
Yeah, but you can't see me, right? So
No, we can't see you.
and I don't want to stop the presentation to figure out how that you can see me. I'm gesturing my hands and they're not helping. So these has two piers actually. Okay, so this is an alt-az mount, basically a cannon, right? You can raise the cannon or move it left and right. Problem with a scope like that is as the sky moves across, you get what's called sky rotation and the image rotates within the scope. So to counter that, the entire instrument platform is actually rotating and is isolated on its own pair system to the other telescope. And then there's an instrument bay here. There's a lot of instruments in here that work with the scope. That I already mentioned, I'm back. That slide was mixed up with this one. This is the actual optical system. I thought it'd be just interesting to show, but this is the main telescope here. And then you can see it has a series of mirrors, and right here are two optical windows that are at the rotation joint between the systems. So so it goes to the instrument bay, which rotates. And I'm only showing here the hydrogen alpha system, so you can look at a photosphere or chromosphere or track filaments in very high resolution and detail. You can run videos. Whoops. And then you have over here just a minor detail. Scopes do put out a lot of, solar scopes do have to dump a lot of heat. That's what all that's about there. Okay, so this is a really impressive instrument. It's out in geosynchronous orbit, if I recall. It's the Solar Dynamics Observatory. It has an array of 4 different cameras here and other cameras throughout. It has a helioseismic, that should be seismometer or something, and helioseismic and magnetic imager, the HMI. And this is sort of just what you can see at the different wavelengths that it provides with its instruments. And we're just going to look at a couple, but you could see like here, 171 angstroms, which is 17.1 nanometers, and a nanometer is 10 to the minus 9 meters. That's how small the wavelength is. You can look at the upper transition region and the quiet corona. So that's that little thin strip here, which is about 60 miles, by the way. Okay, so it has a whack of instruments. The people who wrote the paper only used a couple of those instruments. Then there's the IRIS telescope, which works in the extreme ultraviolet. I noticed this telescope has noisy images, probably because of its nature. And this is a mosaic that they put together once a month over an 8-hour observing period. Okay, on to the main feature. So you have to get some definitions straight. So basically, this is a filament on the sun that you would normally see. Let me just quickly, like right here in this diagram, or here in this image. I wouldn't quite call that a filament, but yeah, that's more of a dark zone. Anyway, so you have this filament, which is basically a plasma tube of hot gas. And then these are all the complicated magnetic field lines that are coming out of from these positive white patches and into these negative black patches. And here they're shown as fibrils, and each is a different color. So what's happening here is that there's some event happening that's causing these magnetic fields magnetic fields to connect and these to disconnect. So these are joining and these are disconnecting. And the important thing behind this is it has to do with coronal mass ejections, because sometimes what happens is that this event causes an entire flux tube to be sprung off into space. Okay, so that's kind of the three-dimensional picture you have, but you have to look at 2 dimensions. So on to the actual paper itself. Here is GONG. It's a hydrogen alpha, which some people in the club would be familiar with, and people on the national site have probably seen plenty of those pictures. And this is a hydrogen alpha picture also from the Chinese telescope, the NBST. And then this is from the Dynamic Solar Observatory, and it's a 304 angstrom channel, which allows you to see active regions of the coronal mass ejections and flare-ups that are bright flare-ups. Over here is what's called a magnetogram, and that's done by measuring polarized light. And here, white is coming out, is a positive field, and black is negative. So if you look at that picture and look at this picture, you can see the black and white here representing the fields going in and out. And then this is all a Dopplergram. Basically, red means it's moving away or red shifted, and blue means it's coming towards you. So the interesting thing with the quark system or Coronado, you can see that by just adjusting the bands selection. Okay, so how do you interpret a Doppler diagram? So these are H alpha. This is the event that they're looking at, and the filament, you notice, is slowly moving to the north. And the region of interest is here, where the field lines are twisting and untwisting. So they're not quite twisting to give you an ejection. They're just getting to a critical point. And when they twist, they heat up. You get these, well, I don't know what's going on my mouse. 1 second. They heat up, and you'll see these bright spots in these other bands of the other instruments. And then the Dopplergram helps you visualize. You can see here that this part is moving inwards and this part is coming outwards. And you can see the evolution here. And then so now it's twisted, and then it starts to untwist. This part's coming back towards you, and this part's going in more. So that sort of gives you an idea of what's going on here. So then these are the Dynamic Solar Observatory channels that I mentioned. The 1700 shows you the sun's surface or photosphere and chronosphere and some ultraviolet light continuum. The 304 I've already mentioned, which is some active regions of the coronal mass ejections and flare-ups. And then the 171 channel, which is the sun's atmosphere or corona, which is that when you see people draw pictures of the sun and you see those nice orangey things come out, that's the corona. And the upper transition region and magnetic arcs or loops. So now I have 3 images here. I have the Dopplergram, I have an H alpha, and I have the magnetic magnetogram. So you can see right here in this little area is where the event is taking place, and you can see the negative and positive magnetic fields. So you have to imagine these things are coming up and out of the surface. And this kind of helps here. You can see the hydrogen alpha, and this kind of tells you how the motion is behaving. And then finally, we put all this together. Now, I've watched this video several times, and I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but you can see what's going on here in terms of the filament growing. You can see how this is happening. This is, by the way, happening on May 16th, 2019. You can actually Google that. You can actually go to GONG and find this just in the hydrogen alpha. It's actually kind of cool. So you could see the Doppler shifting that's occurring here. So the twisting and untwisting. And here, not much change in the magnetic field, but you can see a shifting. And then here you see a flare up. As soon as it goes from twisting to untwisting, you'll see a bright flare. which probably means some plasma is being released. Okay, so I'm going to end that with even you too can enjoy the sun, and I'm just showing off my equipment that I have out on my, bring out on my balcony in the summer, and this is using afocal projection, eyepiece projection onto my camera, and I can get very detailed images, quite comparable to what I've seen for the research project. So I think that's kind of cool. Okay, so with that, I end this presentation.
Thank you, Michelle. Does anybody have any questions for Michelle?
I can't see the chat right now until I end the presentation. So if there's any questions, let me know.
Just quickly check in. No, I think there's no questions tonight, Michelle. Thank you.
Okay.
So folks, we're gonna not have a break tonight. We're gonna go right into our next presentation. First. And I would like to introduce our guest speaker tonight. Our guest speaker is Dr. Yvonne Alcorn, as a postdoctoral fellow at the David Day Dunlop Department of Astronomy and Astrophysics, and received her PhD in astronomy in 2019 from Texas A&M University. Her research focuses on the properties of galaxies and galaxy clusters and how dense environments affect galaxy evolution. In her free time, she screams into the abyss to gain forbidden knowledge beyond the understanding of our fragile human mind, and is a beginning ballet and modern dancer. Fun fact, she's published 2 short astronomy-themed horror stories in the Texas punk rock zine 979 Represent. Please welcome our guest speaker, Dr. Yvonne Alcorn, Lovecraftian horror and astronomy. Over to you, Doctor.
Thank you so much. That might be the best introduction that I've had so far. Here, let me share my screen. Let's see. I like to do advanced sharing options, and I need to share sound. All right. Sorry if this takes me just a second to get everything ready. All right. Need to move this just a little bit. And all right. How's the view?
That looks great. Thanks.
All right. Wonderful. Well, all right, everybody. Thank you so much. I'm so excited to be talking to everybody about a subject so important to me as the combination of horror and astronomy. I have to say, I'm so thrilled people are interested in this subject, since the work of Lovecraft and other kinds of cosmic horror have been present throughout my whole astronomical career. It gave me sort of a literary framework for my own studies and research as well, which you're going to hear about soon. So tonight I'm going to talk to you about 2 of my favorite subjects, astronomy and the fear of the unknown, or horror. The universe itself, reality, how reality works, these can be really overwhelming subjects. And I found that my feelings and experiences around it were very well reflected by this literary genre, which combines the horror, both horror and science fiction, and even discussed the phenomena and implications of my astronomical studies and physics studies as I was studying them. And I think it really changed me as a scientist and as a person. And I really wanted to share with you all why this was so important to me. So to begin, I want to warn everybody before going into the content of some of these books, but there's a bit of an elephant in the room that's been a bit heavily discussed in horror circles and Lovecraftian historians. regarding the creator of this genre. He was a bit of a racist man. I found this out while reading this really, really fun story of his, actually, called Rats in the Walls, which is very scary and fun, and until Lovecraft uses a racial slur, and it kills the whole story. Damn it, Howie, why'd you have to ruin a perfectly good story? Luckily, this has been edited out in several versions, and without it, the story is just fine without it. But it really just points to what a jerk he was in his personal life to casually slip that sort of thing in. So some people say we have to judge people by the time they live, but I think that's baloney, particularly in the case of our subject, Howard Phillips Lovecraft. His work was important in the history of science fiction, popular science, and horror, but many of his works were tainted by his white Anglo-Saxon supremacist ideas. So if you read his books, just read them with a careful eye. I'm not a scholar of race or literature, but there's actually a very interesting renaissance of cosmic horror related to the concept of race that is happening right now. And I encourage you to learn and read as much about as you can about this if you're interested in this subject at all. One person I know of who is quite qualified to talk about this is the writer and professor Victor Laval. If you want to delve into the subject, please look up his work and listen to the interview on the podcast Imaginary Worlds, where he talks about the interesting relationship between the Black experience in America and the cosmic horror of and cosmic horror and the current media being made by writers and creators of color in this genre. Also, I want to mention I will spoil a lot of plots in this talk, but the stories were written in the 1920s and 1930s, and so I like to think that I can give you spoilers. Also, since cosmic horror kind of changed the face of horror and science fiction, you likely know a lot of these plot points already because Lovecraft influenced a lot of very popular writers now. Also, sorry for Stuffed Cthulhu, I had to. I even have Stuffed Cthulhu here that I like to use as a prop sometimes. You shouldn't take yourself too seriously in this genre, otherwise the madness will get to you. So we'll start out by talking about the whole of science fiction as we know it today starts with Mary Shelley, who wrote the first true science fiction novel, Frankenstein, after getting into a friendly competition with Lord Byron to write the best ghost story during a miserable rainy summer that was caused by a volcano that went off nearby. So she and her friends were just stuck inside during this rainy summer, and they started talking about the nature of life, and the subject turned to something called galvanism. I think that's what it's called. It's the study of using electricity to stimulate muscle reactions, and it produces chemical reactions as well. And Mary was actually pretty horrified by this. She said in her diary that she actually didn't sleep at all that night, and she was just imagining this reanimated corpse. So she wrote about it. And rather than a ghost story, it turned into a horror story that inspired a whole new genre, science fiction. So what's interesting about this subject is that she uses new science as a plot element, which delves into the implications of this new science as well. This actually tells us about herself as well, because the science of the time she was in and the culture she was in. Death was a constant, and there was a lot of study around it. But in fact, in her personal life, she had also lost her first child in a stillbirth the previous year. Her mother died only 11 days after her own birth. So not only do we see the influence of this new science, we see a person using this new science to sort of make sense of her own grief and losses. It really gives us a peek into her time and how someone would have reacted to these new scientific advancements. And science fiction, after it continued to do the same, sharing not only scientific ideas, but societal understandings of that science. So I thought a lot about science fiction and horror fiction that I was shaped by while I was studying astronomy. I think you can learn a lot of interesting things about a culture or a person from the art that they produce and enjoy, particularly these very fantastical genres of art like science fiction, horror, and fantasy. I got the idea of this talk from a podcast I listened to, which does analyses of horror media in a political lens. One of the hosts, a film student, says, "Films are the dreams of a civilization and horror is its nightmares." And it made me want to look deeper into the science, into the science fiction and horror that shaped me and the folks around me and how I do my research and our culture as a whole. But I'm not focused on politics. I'm focused on how scientific ideas and discoveries and paradigms are transmitted and analyzed through these fictional works. And I want to understand how this can be better used to teach science and explain my own research, as well as getting myself and other scientists to start thinking outside of the box a little bit more. Science fiction has changed a lot over the years, partially because science has also changed a lot. And here are some examples of earlier sci-fi in various subgenres, exploring different ideas, all of which gives us new ideas in science and in culture. However, I prefer to think of this genre as more like a mythology than a prediction. Even Ursula Le Guin, the writer of The Left Hand of Darkness, which you see in the middle here, says in her introduction to this book about the role of sci-fi, I am not prescribing, I am describing. So we learn more about history and our current paradigms in these stories, rather than them being purely of a speculative nature about how science and technology could go. And this is really more of what I'm interested in as a subject of why I'm interested in the subject is a matter of both self-discovery and as an analysis of science and how it works and how people take it in. So with that introduction, I want to start talking about the circumstances surrounding the science fiction and horror that I just completely delved into when I began my astronomical studies in earnest. In the early 20th century, science fiction was commonly shared in pulp magazines, which were called that because they were made from very cheap wood pulp. And so they were very accessible to the average person. But because of that, it was actually kind of considered a rather trashy literary genre at the time, but so many wonderful ideas and stories and characters were presented in them, like the works of Lovecraft presented here. Here are several covers with a few of his works, none of which I actually talk about in this talk. Sorry about that. I should talk about Shadow Out of Time sometime. But yeah. But also many other contemporary media actually owes its origins to pulp magazines, which I like to think validates my love of so-called trashy or B horror movies. Because there's actually a lot of freedom to work with ideas when the stakes are lower and the media is accessible to people of all socioeconomic means, like through these cheap printing methods. There weren't just science fiction and horror pulps, there were detective pulps and crime pulps and adventure pulps and romance pulps. And, you know, a lot of characters that you probably know were introduced in these kinds of pulps. Zorro, Buck Rogers, Tarzan, Conan the Barbarian, they were all actually characters in these early pulp magazines. And since this is sort of the literary framework that Lovecraft wrote in, let's turn to the man himself. Howard Phillips Lovecraft was born in 1890 in Providence, Rhode Island. And boy, does he like writing about how creepy New England is. He was born into a previously wealthy family, but they had lost their fortune after his father died. Lovecraft was a very, very quiet guy who loved reading and he loved learning anything. He published his first short story in a magazine at age 17, and he started publishing a lot more regularly about 10 years later in pulp magazines. He never made a lot of money off of his writing. He wasn't very well known in his time, but despite these lonesome tendencies, not really getting out too much, not being very popular in the public eye, he actually had quite a lot of correspondences with many other pulp authors and was very well respected by other authors of the time period. He also mentored a lot of very prominent future horror authors. Some prominent examples include Robert Bloch, who wrote Psycho, which was adapted in the movie Psycho. Robert E. Howard, who wrote the Conan the Barbarian series, along with a lot of trashy romance. Do not let him forget that. And August Derleth, who's the person responsible for publishing a lot of Lovecraft's work after his death at the so-called Arkham Publishing House. Lovecraft died very young. He was in relatively poor health and refused to see a doctor until it was way too late, and he died of intestinal cancer. He had no heirs, and he had no interest in securing copyrights to his work, so all of his solo works are public domain, leading to an explosion of authors influenced by his work after they were published by August Derleth. Some writers and filmmakers today you would know who either explicitly say Lovecraft is an influence on them, or who are clearly building on his ideas are people like Stephen King, Junji Ito. If you follow horror manga at all. Guillermo del Toro, Jordan Peele, John Carpenter, one of my favorite director of all time. But I'm only listing my favorites here. There is a whole world of people influenced by his work that I haven't even mentioned. Also, since all his works are free, you can find them very easily in written or audio form online. I even found people reading his works on YouTube and Spotify for free. So if any of these stories interest you, you can just download them and listen to them. You don't have to pay anything. So yeah, but we know for a fact that Lovecraft was a science fanboy. He kept up with the scientific literature and discoveries of the day incredibly closely, which is partially why I'm giving this talk due to how much it influenced his writing. Originally, Lovecraft actually wanted to be an astronomer. As a teenager and a young adult, he actually kept logs of astronomical observations he did for fun. And he published logs of his, and he published some in some astronomical journals, amateur astronomy journals. Just as we see in the letter he wrote to his friend here, he didn't go into astronomy because he thought he was bad at math and he didn't care to learn. Note to anybody listening, very few people start out good at math. You just have to keep trying. It's not magic. Despite this setback, Lovecraft maintained a very strong interest in physics and astronomy. So we'll talk about the cool discoveries in science that happened during and before his life that he incorporated into his writing. And also here is a picture of some of his astronomical observation logs, which I thought was kind of cool, showing when he was observing a comet. But anyway, yes, so science at the time. So at this time, science was really changing from what it used to be. Here we see a time when general relativity and quantum mechanics were being developed. So here's a few of the prominent creators, Einstein, Planck, and here's a bunch of physicists at the Solvay conference in Brussels in 1927. This is when Lovecraft also started publishing extremely regularly. So while these concepts were being discovered, it really brings new ideas, some new philosophies. So like to explain, space and time themselves became relative concepts thanks to general relativity, an idea sort of illustrated here, where time becomes another dimension, just merged with space. The consequence of this idea turns many ideas of what we think we understood on its head. In special and general relativity, we learned that space and time can be stretched and warped depending upon the frame of reference the subject and the observer are at. We learn perception is relative. See what relative, like relativity. This also leads to a very different understanding of gravity, but it also helps us to understand why this force acts over long distances without objects appearing to contact each other. They are warping the space-time between them, which attracts them. So yes, additionally, the physics of the very small was being explored. The very stuff that makes up matter was being understood in new ways. Quantum mechanics was being developed at this time, which turned this deterministic, step-by-step, predictive universe on its head because it predicted a probabilistic or a random universe where nothing can be determined for certain until the measurement is actually made, which changes the system, like how the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment shows us. A science that predicts phenomena change dependent on observation. Hogwash, right? Well, it's not. These scientific paradigms are still being explored today and have actually shown a lot of promise in successful predictions. So this was a new age of science, where what we thought we knew was utterly dashed, and a whole terrifying universe and its consequences were left to be explored, not just by scientists, but by everyone. New science had resulted in new technology and new weapons of war even, and these were put to horrifying use in the meat grinder of a war, World War I, which traumatized the entire world. So science proved to be a double-edged sword, dangerous but fascinating. How do we put away all these discoveries, this useful knowledge, which can be used for both wonderful medical, agricultural, life-expanding things and horrible things, wars, new ways to hurt people. Clearly, this is something we still struggle with today. So here we actually see Lovecraft reacting to this. I love this quote. It's from the beginning of The Call of Cthulhu. And I put the quote written on the right, but I'm about to play a very fantastic retelling by a Lovecraft scholar and impersonator.
most merciful thing in the world, I think, is the inability of the human mind to correlate all its contents. We live on a placid island of ignorance in the midst of black seas of infinity, and it was not meant that we should voyage far. The sciences, each straining in its own direction, have hitherto harmed us little. But someday the piecing together of dissociated knowledge will open up such terrifying vistas of reality and of our frightful position therein, that we shall go mad from the revelation or flee from the deadly light into the peace and safety of a new dark age.
So here we can see how these new ideas were sort of being taken in, very disorienting. No one knew what would happen as we learned more. And Lovecraft, for one, seems to think here that humans can't handle that, our brains simply are not meant to do this and will lose our minds trying to understand all of it. Now, I disagree, but that's for later in the talk. No. There we go. So what did Lovecraft bring to this new genre? What is special about this? How did he bring this anxiety about the new sciences, these ideas about the new sciences into literature? Here, I honestly copy pasted the definitions of his genre, Lovecraftian or cosmic horror, and I thought were the best descriptions of what defines his work. Lovecraft actually wrote about a scientific, materialistic universe. In this way, it is science fiction. There's this idea. Lovecraft includes monsters that are weird, tentacled aliens that want to eat humans or don't care about humans, world destroyers. But the real horror of the universe is that humans are only a small part of the universe, and that we are unequipped to understand the universe because we are so small, because we are simple creatures with simple brains. Seeing how reality works is just beyond us, so it would destroy us to try. So it's not the horrifying monsters and gods like my friend Cthulhu or Nyarlathotep or the Shoggoths that are the source of terror in these stories, but it's actually the universe itself that is the source of horror, which frankly, as an astronomer, greatly amuses me, because we actually do assume in astronomy we are a small part of the universe and that there is no special part of the universe. We call this the homogeneous anisotropy of space. It's a mathematical thing we use. But here, Lovecraft has taken astronomers' assumptions about the universe and turned it into a narrative point. And where does humanity fit in? What are the characters and narrative structures like? Again, we see this idea, humans do not matter. We are insignificant, we are not special. There is no compassionate force that cares about us in these narratives. And instead, we are subject to an uncaring universe. When one looks at these characters in Lovecraft stories as well, one can see why they appeal so much to scientists and people who are interested in science and academics, because often his characters are academics. They're awkward and reclusive, like me during graduate school and undergrad years, and anybody pretty much who has read a lot of Lovecraft. That's a joke. But also his characters are incredibly fragile mentally, I've noticed. They are completely unable to cope with the truths that they have set out to find. And usually by the end of the story, they're either dead or writing to you from beyond the grave at a letter that they kept in their crypt, or they're writing their recollections down at a mental hospital. Now, I think this tells us a lot more about Howie himself than humans as a whole. Hence, I will tell you my interpretations and reactions to the truth Lovecraft writes about are quite different. It also tells us a lot about the reaction to new scientific truths at the time that people were reacting to with fear and uncertainty. So let's get into some stories. I'm going to tell you about some of my favorite stories that have scientific themes. So we can start out with The Color Out of Space, which, by the way, a recent movie version of this came out, and I actually really recommend it. Nick Cage is in it, and he was perfectly cast. And the fact that Nick Cage has a favorite Lovecraft story and It's Color Out of Space, new respect for the man. But anyway, so onto the story. The Color Out of Space is about an asteroid that hits a piece of farmland in New England, because it's always in New England, and it appears to start poisoning the land and everything on it in a way that is similar to like nuclear fallout. Things start breaking apart. There are weird mutations that happen. But instead of these people suffering this this sort of haunting, this sort of attack all on their own, they actually send off for scientists to study this. And what I really enjoyed reading about was the scientists study this phenomenon with what would have been contemporary research equipment for quantum mechanics. So I include a quote here actually from where a bunch of astronomers are, from where a bunch of scientists are doing a bunch of contemporary experiments at the time to understand what's going on with this object, because the object doesn't resemble anything from Earth at all. When they look at a spectrum, which I'll explain in a second, of the object, they can't make out what it's made of. The color even is a color that nobody can actually describe. So I just got, it just tickled me when I was learning about spectroscopy as an undergrad, seeing that happen. So the color in this story behaves quite a bit like radiation, but I only briefly want to mention this because this was being developed as Lovecraft was writing a little bit before, and we see a little bit of his fear of what this new power can do. Radium seemed totally cool because it glowed and possibly had medical applications and could be painted on things. Don't eat it like they did. Also, many of the researchers who studied it, including Henry Becquerel or Marie Curie, died from causes related to exposure to radiation. Marie Curie used to carry around pieces in her pockets, but it wasn't that they were stupid at all. They just didn't know. So again, we see science proving to be this harmful double-edged sword, despite the wonderful promise of what's been found. And that's scary. But with that quote I gave you, I just want to go into what tickled me with Lovecraft describing how scientists at Miskatonic University, a frequent subject of Lovecraftian works, Miskatonic University, were studying this asteroid with this color. And he mentioned that they measured a spectrum to try to determine what this material was made of. So let's briefly go back into quantum mechanics so I can tell you about spectroscopy. So on the left, we see the Bohr model of the atom, which was the paradigm for how atoms worked before quantum theory. The electron and other subatomic particles existed in a definite place and time. One could predict their motion and how they acted by examining their current state, where they were, what forces were acting upon them. However, with quantum mechanics, this proved not to be the case. There's my animation. There we go. Instead of these predictable or deterministic universes, instead of the predictable universe, subatomic particles, particularly the electron, exist in a cloud of possibility. We cannot know their definite location or motion, and definitely not at the same time. Yay, Heisenberg uncertainty principle. So on the right, we see the different possible locations of an electron shown as a cloud in different energy levels for the hydrogen atom. These different energy levels are discrete and small or quantized, as in quantum mechanics or quantum physics. And they are different for different elements. But these electrons also do not like being in the same orbital. They do not like being in the same state. So they must move to different states if an electron is previously occupying a lower energy level. So this is also important because Lovecraft talks about scientists using a spectrum to measure this weird space rock to determine its elemental composition. So this is actually an element of this whole atomic structure. Different elements and molecules have different patterns of light that are released when they are heated, and the light is separated into different wavelengths. So here's an example of the phenomenon. On the left, you can see a setup where there are different lamps that are sent through a prism, like how you make a rainbow. In fact, this is a rainbow. When white light is sent through a prism, you get a rainbow or a continuous spectrum. And but individual elements release light at very specific quantized wavelengths. So by looking at the pattern of light, the presence and the amount of a specific element can be determined by looking for these individual patterns. So if you see this pattern, you're looking at something that has sodium in it. If you're looking at this pattern, you see you see something that has hydrogen atoms in it, calcium atoms, mercury atoms. definite patterns. So now that we've seen how scientists in the color out of space use spectroscopy, I myself use spectroscopy every day at work. My entire thesis was built on measuring one of these emission lines from hydrogen, that little red one right here on the right. Astronomers call it hydrogen alpha. It was mentioned in the previous talk. We see it very often in space because, as we know, most of the material in the universe, as we understand it, that is not dark matter or dark energy, is made of hydrogen, including stars. In particular, this can be a sign of very strong star formation, and this is because stars are born in clouds of dense hydrogen gas. If the gas falls into a gravitational well and ignites, it forms a star. Stars, like our sun, are so hot they produce a continuous rainbow-like spectrum, but young stars are often still surrounded by their birth clouds, which are mostly made of hydrogen. An example of this that you can see with some binoculars or a telescope is the Pleiades cluster or the Orion Nebula. As the light from the star hits the gas around it, the gas heats and the electrons in the gas are pushed up in energy level. But electrons are very much like me, very lazy. So they emit light at a very specific wavelength depending upon which energy is being released as a unit of light or a photon so that it can go to a lower energy state. I love being at a lower energy state. From these photons, we can see this light pattern at the top, particularly that lovely red line, which is one of the most common energy transitions. So next story, Whisper in Darkness. So this story actually came out the same 1 year after the planet Pluto was discovered, and this is important because the main character is a professor at Miskatonic University. He receives a very weird letter from a friend of his named Ackley. Ackley claims that aliens are attacking him and his animals. Yes, we hear this on YouTube all the time, but Ackley has a very sudden, drastic change of his mind and asks the professor to come out and meet these aliens because they're actually very peaceful. And that was so weird, the professor decides, I should see what's going on. So he visits his friend, and his friend tells him all about these aliens, which are made from fungus on the planet Yugoth, which is actually Pluto, and they want to transform, and they want to take humans to visit this planet. The only problem is that to go into space, a human has to have their brain removed and put in a jar. So this is actually one of the first brain in jar stories that was out there. So maybe some neurologists and biologists should also talk about this story, which apparently is too scary, and the professor didn't want to do it. I mean, I guess some people wouldn't want to go see the universe. I don't know, take my brain out, put it in a jar. I want to see Pluto. But no, it turns out Ackley was already in one of those jars, and the guy that the professor was talking to was just an alien in a mask. Oh no. So this story was being written in the same year that Pluto was observed, in 1930. So clearly Lovecraft was definitely following the literature. Here are some cool pictures actually I took during my holiday to the Lowell Observatory in Flagstaff, Arizona in 2015. They were doing the Pluto pass by with the New Horizons satellite, which showed us that Pluto has that beautiful heart-shaped plateau on it that we all love. So Clyde Tombaugh was actually a worker at Lowell Observatory, not an astronomer, but he was very good at building telescopes and was hired by the observatory because he demonstrated he was a fantastic observer and knew how to fix their telescopes. So they had him observing every night and looking for a possible object outside of the orbit of Neptune, which somebody had predicted would be there because of weird perturbations on Neptune's orbit. So Clyde eventually discovered Pluto. He was only about 23, 24 years old. And with Pluto, he also discovered the Kuiper Belt, which is a belt of asteroids and dwarf planets and comets toward the edge of the solar system. So, and of course, after this discovery, he was sent off to get his doctorate in astronomy because, I mean, come on, he's discovered Pluto. So here we can actually see the discovery plates for the planet Pluto, which were on display during my visit. It was fantastic. Clyde would flip these images of the same area of the sky back and forth to try to detect movement. So just that little dot pointed out by these arrows on from photographic plate to photographic plate. He must have been so patient. And also, because of New Horizons, we got to see what Pluto actually looks like. And as noted, it is lovely. Oh, it's lovely. Yeah, I think one of these plateaus was named after Tombaugh. It's actually kind of cute. But not only is Pluto mentioned in this work, it's also the first time Lovecraft uses the word galaxy in his works. The existence of other galaxies was also fairly recently discovered, and I'm an extragalactic astrophysicist. I study galaxies outside of our own. So this is fascinating to me. This is when my field started. This wasn't known until after the work of Vesta Slifer and Edwin Hubble, who discovered the expanding universe, which I'll talk about in a second. Before this, people thought that the Milky Way was the whole universe. The idea of other universes or island universes were really more of a thing of philosophy. And all of these things that we now know are actually galaxies outside of our own, Andromeda, the Whirlpool Galaxy. They were called spiral nebulae, which they thought were smaller and inside of the Milky Way. However, with the development of spectroscopy,
I think we just lost Dr. Alcorn. So we'll just give it a minute and hopefully she'll reconnect with us. As noted in chat, the perils of Zoom. That's exactly what just happened.
I'm just going to send her a quick email. And
thanks, Ed.
Get that.
While we're waiting, Dennis, I just wanted to mention, because dusk is at 4:30 tomorrow. I know that seems incredible, but it is. Members observing night will be starting early at 4:30 tomorrow. So if you arrive at 6:30, which is a more usual time, people might get a little upset about headlights and stuff. So try to be there early on. And it's a long night of observing.
Thanks for that update, Gord. I was really into this. I don't know.
Yeah, it was really good.
Yeah, this was very exciting.
Happy I'm not the only one I read it.
Were you able to get through to her by email, Ed?
No. Oh, here we go. Oh, she did get back to me. She said, terribly sorry, my internet went out, or hourly, comes back on soon.
So she's trying to reconnect?
I believe so.
Okay. Because I hate to be left hanging like
Yeah,
it's good stuff.
that. Very good. Very well presented.
Yeah.
At least for myself. I'm not sure about the rest of the people, but
Oh, yeah.
some of the comments are very positive, certainly in the chat boxes right now. So
yeah.
It must have been a crazy time to be writing science fiction with like discovery of Pluto and relativity being so new and all these kinds of things.
oh yeah. Can you imagine, Scott, what it was like then? Like just everything was new.
I've read a lot of Lovecraft, but I never really connected it to those days of astronomy and what was going on there in terms of how new it all was. It actually makes some of the stuff that he wrote a lot more. It makes a lot more sense, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I have read a lot of Lovecraft, and when I saw that she was presenting today, I went back and reread some of the stories, and just you see even a whole new light, knowing how connected he was to the science.
Well, if she's unable to finish tonight, we will definitely arrange to have her back. That's for sure. So no sign of her, Ed, or we have a couple more minutes?
No, she just sent you just sent that one message. Yeah, she just said, terribly sorry, my internet went out. Hourly, comes back on soon. Well, that's odd.
Oh, maybe she was saying hopefully comes back on soon.
Oh yeah, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah. Okay.
Strange.
We'll give it a couple more minutes and then. Oh, there we go.
Terribly sorry. All right.
Oh, no worries. Welcome back. We're all sitting here on pins and needles.
We were just saying this is great. Sorry, I'll just go back on mute here. There. Go.
Okay. Thank you. Welcome back.
Thank you so much. Okay. Can I get co-host again so I can share? All right. I was talking about Vesto from what I remember. Thank you. Now you all understand why you have to love Vesto like I do. All right. Wonderful. Okay. So where did I leave off? Vesto had discovered galaxies were redshifted. We've gotten to that part, hopefully. Additionally, what was interesting and part of my thesis work was that Vesto actually found that galaxies had, let's see, all right. Ooh, sorry. That galaxies had one side of the galaxy would have that slight little red shift. The other side of the galaxy would have a slight little bit of a blue shift. That meant one side was moving away from us, one side was moving toward us. So these galaxies were rotating like the Milky Way. That's pretty interesting, which also tells us by using Kepler's laws about how big they were. So yes, you can do amazing things with spectroscopy. This is why I had a whole thesis built on it. Additionally, while I was in Flagstaff, I actually got to see the spectrograph that Vesto did these measurements on. That's this gold object here. Yeah, I'm really not good at taking photos indoors, but so I apologize for the glare, but I got to nerd out a little bit over the actual spectrograph that discovered, oh, wow, there are other galaxies and they're moving away from us super fast. So this actually led to a very important new physics paradigm, which was the expanding universe. So from these observations taken by Vesto Slipher and eventually Edwin Hubble and his assistant, this was looked at by the theoretical physicist Georges Lemaitre, who is pictured here. He was a Jesuit, I think he was a Jesuit priest. He was a priest who also was an astronomer. Overachievers. Anyway, so he actually proposed this expanding universe model by looking at this data and noticing that things were moving away faster as they got further away. This was sort of not looked at in a very good way for a while. The math was pretty clearly correct, but there was this idea, why would the universe be changing? It had no reason to be changing. Why would it be expanding? So as was stated when he was consulting with Einstein about this idea, and Einstein was very committed to this idea of a static, non-expanding universe. Your calculations are correct, but your physics is atrocious. And this idea was later called the Big Bang Theory, which the astronomer Fred Hoyle, who was also a science fiction author, by the way, coined the term Big Bang Theory. It was meant to be super insulting, and yet we use it all the time in astronomy. But yes, so we've talked a little bit about the expansion of the universe. Now I want to talk about my favorite of Lovecraft's stories. I like this story in particular because I read it as an undergraduate physics major. The main character, Walter Gilman, is also a physics student going to Miskatonic University, again. Although I wish I could get my next postdoc there at the daggone University of Innsmouth. Yay, fan service jokes. He moves into a room in this creaky old house because it's very cheap rent, and it's rumored to be haunted by the witch Keziah Mason, who was killed during the 17th century for witchcraft. But Gilman is a man of science, yes, but also a student of folklore. He soon notices that the room around him moves mysteriously at night. Strange angles form because the room is shaped very, very weird with odd geometry. And one night, Keziah Mason, the witch, and her familiar rat appear. And Gilman learns that she isn't a magician, but she's actually a mad scientist before her time, who has learned how to manipulate the universe, and space and time by working with the great old one, Nyarlathotep. And she uses non-Euclidean geometry to travel through space to go to strange planets. And she tries to initiate Gilman into doing this with her. But then she tries to murder a baby and does a bunch of other messed up things, and Gilman refuses. And of course, at the end of the story, he dies, but that's Lovecraft, and his unpredictable endings, uplifting stuff. But despite my jeers, this actually might be my favorite Lovecraft story. It's very well paced and very, very scary, actually. So Lovecraft is super into this idea of non-Euclidean geometry, which seems to creep him out a lot. But it's honestly not that scary. I hate to break it to you, since this is sort of like the spooky talk. Euclidean geometry is just simply classical geometry, where you imagine working on a flat plane. On these flat planes, the ancient Greek philosopher Euclid derived a number of very important geometrical rules. For example, that the interior angles of a triangle always add to 180 degrees, and two parallel lines never cross. Well, in non-Euclidean geometry, which actually was developed a fair bit before this story was written in the early 19th century, we think by Gauss, but he didn't publish it. This is why you have to publish your work. And it's simply just not working on a flat surface. The surface can be curved or warped. For example, on the middle panel, you can see that a triangle on a spherical plane will always be greater than 180 degrees when you add up all of its angles. On a hyperbolic or a saddle plane, the angles will always add to less than 180 degrees. However, these mathematics were actually very, very necessary for learning how to work with quantum mechanics, for determining how light travels through curved space-time. So it was very helpful for theoretical physicists to employ to create GR as we know it. But this geometry is still only really scary if you have to take a class in general relativity or cosmology, and then, oh boy, it was very confusing. I might actually have to go insane if I were a theoretical physicist rather than an observational astronomer. So I want to tell you a cool thing that this warping of space-time can do. And a little bit of background on me, it actually made me change my major from fermentation science, that is making beer for a living, to astronomy. And so this is more interesting than beer, but I have to give you a little bit of background first. So first of all, one of the ideas of general relativity is that things in a gravitational field, say on Earth, are how, so let's say I'm in this room, we block out all of my doors and windows, and we put me in space and then send me going up at 1G. How can I tell the difference between that and what's going on right now? According to general relativity, I can't. So an accelerating frame of reference can be treated the same as a gravitational frame of reference. So same thing with free falling, that's weightlessness. So that's no acceleration. Let's see, that accelerating frame of reference is a static frame of reference in a gravitational field. It's the same thing, you can't tell them apart. But say if you take a light and move it through a gravitational field or an accelerating frame of reference, it can only move at the speed of light, which is c, which limits how fast it can move. That means that sometimes its light path will curve. Its light path will curve because it perceives this as being a shorter amount of space because it's moving at the speed of light. The space there's space expansion and compression and time dilation and compression that happens as things move closer and closer to the speed of light. So this light will travel along curved space-time. This is why this non-Euclidean geometry is important, because in this curved frame of reference, two parallel lines might actually cross at some point. So that can cause something called gravitational lensing. Say if there is an object warping space-time and there's light coming from behind it, the light from the object behind this mass can be deflected around the object. And this is actually sort of what it looks like on an astronomical scale. This was predicted by general relativity. One of the ways that this can happen is, say something massive like a galaxy cluster has something behind it. You can actually see multiple images of this object because the light is distorted around this warped space-time. And the thing is, this was actually observed. This is real. We know this is real. It's been, I'm going to show you some pictures. For example, this is what's called an Einstein ring. So if an object is perfectly behind this lensing galaxy, you get a near perfect ring, distorted. Also, what's very helpful for astronomers is it's magnified, which allows us to look at very, very distant objects. So this is a beautiful image of an Einstein ring. However, it's not always this dramatic of a look that you get from gravitational lensing. Sometimes you just get something called weak gravitational lensing. So if you look very carefully at this image, you can see little arcs along the edges of this galaxy cluster. You can also see that it sort of looks like you're looking at it through a looking glass. This is actually an effect of weak gravitational lensing. These objects are behind something that is so massive that even if they're not perfectly aligned with the object, the shape of them is slightly distorted into arcs. I like to tell this joke sometimes, now that I've explained what gravitational lensing is to you. I actually have a tattoo of it, and I like to joke that I have my lensing cluster here, and I have my background galaxies here. So let's see what happens when we add a little mass to the system. Astrophysics. Anyway, so there's very, very strong gravitational lensing, creating these lovely Einstein rings with a single object, perfect alignment. Sometimes you get a weaker effect, weak gravitational lensing, and sometimes the universe is just messing with us. Sometimes it just feels like that. So yes, I've talked about 3 of my favorite works. I'm briefly going to go over a few other what I think are astronomical or appropriate themed books for us. One of them is called The Call of Cthulhu. Many people have heard of it. I'm going to be honest with you, it is a little bit of a disappointing story, but it deals with the themes of space-time and deep time, and astronomers have this tradition on April 1st, April Fool's Day, of submitting fake journal articles, and one of them was actually based on The Call of Cthulhu, about curvatures of space-time in the South Pacific, which is where Cthulhu lies dreaming. So if you want to read that, you should write it down. It was pretty funny, actually. They tried to work out how space-time could be curved underneath the Pacific Ocean due to the geometry of this strange alien city. Additionally, The Shadow Out of Time was a very fun read. It's about alien scientists who take over a human's body to study humanity and how evolution is working on Earth. So the human and the alien just switch bodies. The human also gets to learn. It has deep themes of very deep time, sort of actual like time scales of the Earth, which is fascinating to think about. There's The Mountains of Madness, which inspired partially the movie The Thing by John Carpenter, one of the greatest directors of all time. It's about an Antarctic expedition that finds a alien spacecraft. But in The Mountains of Madness, this was about an exploration force that finds an old civilization, not just a UFO from prehistory. So there was a whole civilization in Antarctica that was in this story. But again, deep time, very fun. Also, a fun thing about Mountains of Madness, The Thing, which was inspired by Mountains of Madness, is that there are some observatories on the South Pole. So it's called the South Pole Telescope. And the people who run that telescope during the winter always watch The Thing before the last flight. After the last flight, I forget which one. One of them sounds a lot scarier than the other. Very dark sense of humor, even darker than mine. Then there's the work Nyarlathotep, which is a very short story, but they think that it was inspired by the shows of Nikola Tesla. And also, since it's the holidays, I actually recommend reading the story The Festival. It's all about holiday cheer, about a guy who goes back home and sees his family, and his family wants him to go ride on bat creatures into the night to celebrate the solstice in the old ways. So I don't know, go hang out with your family. I'm going to California to visit my family. Maybe we'll ride otters instead of bat creatures. Just don't drink too much and end up in a hospital like the character at the end of this book. So I've talked to you for a long time about these stories and the science behind them, but I have a pretty major disagreement with Lovecraft about how his characters react to the phenomena that I wanted to share with you. Yes, I'm disagreeing with a dead guy who can't defend his ideas, but he was a little bit racist, so I don't think y'all will get too mad at me for that. As we discussed, there is so much fear and fragility in the mind of his heroes, possibly due to this worldwide trauma of war and rapid and mind-warping new physics paradigm that emerged from general relativity and quantum mechanics. Okay, yeah, that sounds like a lot. However, the process of science and seeing the phenomena that I have seen with my own eyes has changed me in ways as dramatic as Lovecraft's characters when they encounter these terrifying cosmic truths. Only in science, when your reality is challenged, you are trained not to break. You are trained to push further, to explore further. Admittedly, we have about 90 years of scientific progress and getting used to the new universe since then, but I digress. In this way, we can actually turn old Howie's ideas about science on their head. We, the scientists and science lovers, need to be more like the cultists and madmen of these stories than the academics, going into our discoveries openly without expecting a universe that conforms to our beliefs. So I see how small I am. I see how little I understand. But rather than let this consume me, I see this as a source of joy. There's so much to learn, and I may be small, but it's all I have, and I may as well use these tools in my training that my training taught me to dig further, because it's actually amazing that we can measure the universe in this way. So I want to focus on an example from my own research. When you're in professional astronomy, sometimes it's really easy to get caught up in all the numbers and the formulae and getting things published and making figures and lots of coding. Oh my God, the coding. You'd think I was actually a software engineer. But when I actually take a step back and put these numbers into something real and recognizable, I find myself in a position very similar to what the protagonists of cosmic horror find. I am a great ape that uses the brain that developed to forage and communicate with others and work in very small groups and recognize dangers, whether they're real or not, to study something that is so huge, I cannot imagine it, over processes that take even longer than human evolution as a whole has taken. So how could I possibly be equipped for this? So here we see actually a cluster that I'm studying now. If you want to look it up, it's called Abell 2390. This galaxy cluster is located so far away that the expansion of the universe stretches the wavelengths of light it has releases, so that when I measured it, it's shifted to almost infrared. The light has taken nearly 3 billion years to reach Earth. Humans were not around when that light was released from the galaxy cluster. Dinosaurs were not even around. I think 3 billion years ago, that was when life was still monocellular. It's like looking at a great old one, these gods, these monsters from a Lovecraftian story. This cluster is made up of hundreds of galaxies traveling through this cluster, attracted to the gravity produced by the dark matter, which holds this cluster together, and through gas that is moving so fast that it's heated until it glows in the X-ray. As galaxies fall into this cluster, their gas is stripped from them to form more of this gas that's between the galaxies and heating to rip off more of this gas. And this makes the galaxy stop forming stars. It becomes almost like a cemetery or a necropolis of galaxies. This space environment is so different from what we know, from even the environment of our Milky Way galaxy. There's so much matter in these clusters. And by the way, the Milky Way is not in a cluster. There's so much matter that it warps the space-time around it, creating those beautiful weak lensing arcs, like I showed you in the last story. And in the center of the cluster, right here, we see something called the brightest cluster galaxy, or a BCG. I'm studying what I think is a jet coming out of it from the supermassive black hole at the center of the galaxy. And I want to learn how this interacts with the X-ray gas around it. How does it affect the other galaxies in the cluster, if it even does, because everything is so far apart, it might not even be affecting it. And I also want to study how this process of gas getting ripped off of galaxies happens. It produces some of the most beautiful phenomena in the universe, in my opinion, called jellyfish galaxies. So you can see the galaxy traveling through the intercluster medium, this hot X-ray gas, and it leaves behind a trail of gas that has been heated and ripped off of it, forming what looks like tentacles of a jellyfish. And here's another picture of it as well from a little bit further away. You can see this gas being ripped off, creating sort of this fan-like structure or this jellyfish-like structure. So I say that galaxies die as they enter these galaxy clusters, though. However, I mean, that's not really the best word for it. It's more that their star formation is quenched. They stop forming stars, but star formation can still happen if they are introduced to more gas. As Lovecraft himself says, that is not dead which can eternal lie, and with strange eons even death may die. So these numbers are so huge, and there is so much here, and I am so small, and I deign to study a phenomenon that kills galaxies, since I am just a curious ape that wants to understand how galaxies have their gas removed from them and shut off star formation in a cluster. How will I even understand the data from something that huge? I barely understand the concept of a billion. But so now you can see why cosmic horror is almost the best way to talk about this. There's almost no other way to talk about the majesty of them, and then by terror and awe. Think of the time spans, think of the size. This is something so much, it's even bigger than our own galaxy, and let it overwhelm you. And they called me mad for my obsession with these clusters, but soon they will realize it is they who are mad. So if you take nothing else from this talk, I want you to learn from these stories a different way to look at things that you don't understand. Unlike Lovecraft, look into the things that you don't understand, and you can find beautiful things in them, like how I found this BCG with a jet, how I find these a beauty in gas being ripped off of dying galaxies going through superheated gas in a cluster. And although and likely you will be driven to more questions. Maybe that's the madness. Openness to what's there rather than a rigidity seen in these Lovecraftian protagonists will allow you to truly learn about reality in the universe. Let your observations and the science change you. That's the nature of learning and integrating what you have learned. This universe is so much bigger than we can conceive and weirder than we can imagine. And that's actually a wonderful thing because there will always be more questions, more to learn. When the void looks into you, or Cthulhu, or also my friend depicted here in a much less threatening manner, when the void looks back into you, ask it more questions, because even if you don't find all the answers, you might find some. And I guess I will end with that here. How long was that? That was about, I think, yeah.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Alcorn. If you're fine, we'll open it up to questions if you're okay with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes.
So if you have a question, just raise your hand and we'll see what we can do. And I'll monitor. If you want to put it in the chat, you can put it in the chat and we'll let Dr. Alcorn know that. And again, thank you. It was awesome.
Thank you. Thank you. I get a little passionate about this stuff.
I see Bob's got his hand up. Go ahead, Bob.
Oh, yes.
Bob just took his hand down.
Oh, might have been I sometimes mess that up.
That's what it was. Yes, it was my mistake.
No, I was just clapping. I was giving a hand.
Thank you.
Great presentation. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, there's so much to look at in this particular genre, and I'm actually very interested in maybe in the future. I'm hoping eventually to. I'm really excited for my professor days in the future because I would love to learn how to use this to teach. Actually, I think it could be a great thing to harness because so many people have actually learned from science fiction.
Does anybody else have any questions or want to comment on something?
And if you just want to nerd out about Lovecraft, I totally understand.
Well, you mentioned you wanted to know how to use this for teaching. I can tell you if you did this presentation to young adults, young people, they're going to be fascinated. This is my personal opinion because, and it's being said in the comments, you know, your passion is infectious. You're going to encourage people to read, which is a starting point.
Oh, absolutely.
You know? And then from there, it just grows, you know, it's just, so yeah, I think you've got a great starting point here, just an awesome starting point.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So.
Oh, yeah. And I see somebody asked, what are my favorite, do I have any favorites in terms of contemporary science fiction authors and filmmakers? Ooh, so I do. I've mentioned John Carpenter is wonderful. I absolutely, so I'm going through Dune now as well. Everybody's going through Dune. The movie was quite good in my opinion. I was just convinced by a bunch of other astronomers at our department holiday party to read The Three-Body Problem, and they really sold me on it. So anyway, that's I guess my answer to that. Also, do see Nick Cage in The Color Out of Space. He was so good.
And I see Russell Brown has his hand up. Go ahead, Russell.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of reiterate the sort of this presentation. Like I myself, like I've been reading Lovecraft for years, and I just seeing the your presentation and the sort of the science behind it that he was sort of referring to and all kind of stuff. Like I just thought that your presentation was amazing. The energy, I think that this would be a great tool for education in the future. I am very much a non-scholar, sort of more enthusiast, and I learned so much from your presentation today.
Oh, I'm so glad. Thank you so much. Yeah, and also I just think it's a great way of expressing a scientific paradigm without like bogging someone down with too much math, if you know what I mean by that. So some people might just want to have fun with it and learn. I feel like that's a good way of getting it, of letting people sort of experience these wonders of the universe. Also, again, sometimes it makes science a little bit more fun if you're actually in the field. Because I like my little speech on I'm the curious ape.
Does anybody else have any other questions or comments?
Revelation Space Universe by Alistair Reynolds. I'm going to look this up. Thank you, Christopher.
Well, Doctor,
Okay,
go ahead,
sorry.
Ed. No, go ahead, Ed.
If I'm allowed, if the Zoom driver can ask a question as well. So Dr. Alcorn, what do you think about multiverse? If there comes to be proof that our universe is one of many universes, what does that do to the horror of our existence?
Oh God, so much. This has actually been thought about in a few sci-fi concepts. Like I love thinking about sci-fi concepts and then never write the story down because we all know how work goes. But it could be like for example, there's this idea, oh my God, this is so dark, of quantum suicide, that you just transfer your consciousness to another multiverse dimension and you cannot die that way. It's the weirdest thing, and I think it would make a fantastic sci-fi story. The multiverse theory is in a way it's a little bit horrifying, but I also in my own personal life kind of take the Rick and Morty approach to it, which is just you can have fun with it. Why not learn how to harness it and watch interdimensional cable?
I might not sleep so well tonight. just kidding. Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
And if I may as well, like when you were gone there on your internet disconnection there, we had a small chat going about you being an imposter because your Ackley misspelled. Was that intentional or was that just...
No, definitely not 3 aliens in a mask trying to get everybody to go to Pluto. Why do you ask?
Well, in your presentation, you misspelled Ackley.
Yeah. No, totally not an alien.
Sure.
That was the real act. No.
Yeah. Yeah.
Does anyone else have any comments or questions? Well, Dr. Alcorn, on behalf of the RASC Winnipeg Center, thank you very much for a very enjoyable and enlightening talk tonight. And hopefully if you develop some more, we would love to have you back again in the future.
Oh, I would love to be here. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, wonderful. And just so you know, we just continue on. Our meeting is now finished and people are able to just stay on and chat and visit with each other for a little bit of social get together while we can in these COVID times. But
it's getting pretty late here, so I'm probably going to have to turn in.
That's what we figured. So, okay. Well, again, thank you. And then to all the members of the RASC Winnipeg Center, thanks for coming tonight. And those that wish can stay on and just have a bit of a social time. And we will chat with you all again in the future. And have a great night.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
I said good night all, but I'm not leaving.
That was a fascinating presentation. That was really good. That was awesome.
Yeah, I wish I'd seen it.
Yeah.
Oh. How you doing? Hi, Gord.
Ed, I hate to do business, but did the link for the meeting change?
No, no. I sent out like I sent out this. Well, this is just paper copy.
No. I mean from last month. Like, is it changing month to month now?
Yes. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Okay, because they were getting the November link on the website because I didn't know it had changed.
Oh no. Oh, crap.
So okay, well that makes sense then. I'll have to yeah, I'll have to copy the link from the emails, or if you can send me the link ahead of time.
Yeah.
Or if we could get a webmaster to do things like that, then it would go better. But Like I said, I'm reaching a saturation point right now with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I don't blame you. If you could show me how to edit that, like you post the article, if you could show me how to edit that, then I could go in there.
Log in, click on
website.
edit at the top of the screen.
And then just paste the.
Then you just highlight the text and it pops up a link icon, and you can put the link in. It's pretty easy.
Okay.
You have a admin access to the site, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah. You see the gray bar on top.
Yeah,
right?
it's like maybe a word editor.
Okay. Yeah.
You can just edit whatever you want and just save it. It will be there.
Yeah. So maybe from now on, Gord, just don't put a link in there, and I'll try to remember to go in there and put the link in once I create it.
Well, what I'll do when I create the meeting is I'll say meeting link TBD, and then you can go in and update it. Yeah,
that would be great. Yeah.
Okay, because we have, like I said, I've been spending the entire meeting fielding questions and stuff, so
man.
I'm getting.
Yeah. Okay.
And I've got a real old dog that is not doing well. So.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyway. Enough about me.
Yeah, I don't know what happened to the website login. That was really strange.
I applied an update and it screwed it up. That's what happened to it. So now I have to figure out how to fix it.
Yeah, okay. See, everybody's seeing the crap that we go through. So Russell, are you new to the organization or?
Yeah, I joined right before the Sprucewood Star Party. And this is my first meeting that I've actually been able to be off work for and not have anything happening on a Friday night.
So I like the way that you've worked the telescopes into your background there. Good
well,
job.
It's
a Mars poster. Totally.
Yeah. And the space station Lego, but that's
what that is. Okay.
Yeah, I have the same
book. I'm surprised I don't see your book there too.
I got this one here ready to go.
There you go.
This junk behind me is actually astronomy junk, just so you know.
Yeah, so I've just been a member for for just a few months, but
how are you liking it so far?
So far pretty good. Yeah, I bought this scope here. I bought off Sylvia at the Star Party. And I've been taking that out most nights, just basically moon and planet observing.
You got a Mac Newt as well?
Sorry?
You've got looks like a Mac Newt in the back, or sorry, a Maxitoff.
Yeah, that's a Mac Cast, yeah. And then I got my 8-inch Dobsonian that I bought.
Cool. Hang on. Good planetary scope and good DSO scope. That's
I haven't had that Dobsonian out since. Actually, I took it out once since the Star Party. But
it hasn't been as nice a fall as some have been.
Yeah.
And this is the first decent weather we've had in a month right now. So.
But yeah, things are going. Got the binos out as well, but just trying to get more time outside. Got a little munchkin running around too, so I was trying to find time between when the sun goes down and when he gets to sleep to get up there.
Well, the good news is the sun goes down early right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of disconcerting leaving work and it's starting to get dark by the time I arrive home. It's like,
Well, right now I'm working on, my window opens at 2 a.m. to get called for work. So I'm usually sleeping in the evening and then going to work in the middle of the night. So it's trying to find time.
Yeah, when my kids were young, I wasn't getting out much at all because I would be falling asleep at 10 o'clock.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can't remember if I showed it at one of the Boston pizzas, but if you remember last winter, I was busy or fall or spring. I was busy knitting an Icelandic sweater
Yes.
during the frost and pizza.
Yeah.
Finally got that thing finished. I've been wearing it. It's so warm.
They're nice to read into the container.
Yeah. I'm going to have to start another one. You know, tonight during the early part of the meeting, while I was watching, I was darning socks.
Okay.
Oh,
Karen was talking about knitting Icelandic sweater. Sorry, we were just having a technical issue here, but Catherine brought the new cat down. So it's the only reason we're showing this is because Jay always likes to have, and here's the picture of the cat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So here's the picture of our cat.
Oh.
It's,
So her name is Jupiter, actually. She was from Humane Society, and they
Yeah, good for
actually
you.
had her name Jupiter. So
maybe we should change it to Juno.
yeah.
we call her Jupe. It's easier.
Anyway.
Yeah, that would be easier to call. Yeah, the main rule of naming cats is never name a cat anything you wouldn't want to yell out your back door at 11 o'clock at night. That's from Terry Pratchett, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's very wise. Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, happy holidays, everybody. This is my little tree here. Gonna set it up
Nice.
again, but yeah, it's an LED little tree here. So happy
Oh,
holidays, everybody.
Okay.
And we'll see. Yeah, that was a great meeting tonight. Really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, it was really good. Yeah.
nice.
Thanks,
night,
Stu. Yeah,
Take
good
care.
night.
Good night.
Yeah.
She sure likes them.
Yeah, when the internet cut out, did everybody do like me? It was like watching a TV show that's at the climax and then to be continued.
That's right.
I
Yeah,
thought my internet cut out. I was checking out my router. I'm like,
yeah, I was doing that too. I thought, crap, because it's happened with me as well quite a bit. I thought, oh crap, there goes my internet. And it was right at the best part of the story, right? It was the Lovell Observatory and
yeah.
Pluto, finding Pluto and all that. That was good. So yeah, she's a very interesting person. That's for sure.
Mhm.
Motivating.
Well, those who were suggesting meeting topics during the meeting, I don't know if anybody's here, like we're happy to chase those down if people want to suggest meeting topics. It's because right now the council is basically thinking stuff up, right? And
Yeah, that's a good point.
so I didn't make that note because I was busy while people were making those comments, but we should have a meeting about this. Well, you know who to invite. Let us know. Right?
Yeah, I can't remember where the idea for Dr. Alcorn came in, but yeah, she was good. She's presented that presentation before, like to the RASC Toronto.
Yeah, I think she's from Toronto, isn't she?
Well, your intro said University of Toronto.
Yeah. I wonder what the weather is supposed to be like tomorrow for.
Supposed to be a little bit of cloud rolling through around supper time, but generally it's supposed to be clear. Transparency is not going to be great, but clear in -10, getting down to -19 in the middle of the night. So it's getting to be, well, -19 I think is daytime high, seasonal. So still pretty decent, but I'm not sure I'll be sticking around too long. I'm not sure I'm going to bring my big scope and set it up and stay all night kind of thing, but we'll see. We'll see how Astrospheric is still looking pretty good for. Oh, okay. The intermittent cloud is cleared to about noon, so it's going to be nice from 2 o'clock on till Sunday at 1 o'clock. So it's a good night.
Yeah.
And temperatures are actually supposed to be temperatures. If nobody's seen Astrospheric, here I'll show it to you. Oh, you'll have to give me presentation access.
Yeah, just hang on. Give me a minute. Okay, there you go. Should have it.
So this is astropspheric, right? Astropspheric.com, and this
Okay.
is the forecast, right? So basically it's saying there's some intermittent cloud coming in around noon and then nice and clear. Seeing will be, or I should say transparency will be average, seeing will be below average, so don't do planet stuff. And it's going to be clear all night, right? So it's actually fairly accurate. And you can see the temperatures rising too. So it'll be decent.
It's close to what a clear sky chart is saying too.
Yeah, I think they may use the same model because they do say under the credits here, forecast data provided by the Canadian Meteorological Center.
Yeah.
I think there's really two models. The other model is an American one, and it tends to be a little more aggressive about precipitation and things. But astropspheric is fantastic. It's the best one I've seen. Plus, it does ISS passes, and also it incorporates aurora forecasts, right? So if you see the KP5 while you want to go out and observe, don't bother going observing because the aurora is going to be light pollution.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Anyway, so I'll go tomorrow and see who shows up.
If I'm not working, I'll try to be there, but we'll see
Yeah,
how it brings tonight.
It's generally pretty casual. Like there's no set program. I hope nobody expects a set program because I don't got one.
Just point and shoot.
Yeah, go point your scope at the sky, and if anybody else is doing something interesting, ask them what they're doing. I just got my big scope working, so but it looks like a rat's nest of cables right now, so I have to figure out how to make it a little less cumbersome to set up.
Is that the one with the glass tie that you actually got? You bought, like, it was the glass mirror you bought and you kind of built the scope around it, like that's the scope?
No, this is here, I'll share my screen again. I had an opportunity to get this one a month or so ago. It's a 10-inch.
Wow, nice.
Yeah. I feel a little bad. It was an estate sale, and they didn't really know what it was worth. I tried to give them what it was worth, but it was an amazing deal, and I figured I'd get it versus somebody else getting it for a song. But yeah, it's a 10-inch f4.7 on an NEQ6 mount. So the NEQ6 mount is worth about $2,200, and the scope's worth about $800 or $900. So it's a big rig for. And I took that long ass refractor off. It's just too heavy. The whole scope is just heavy as hell. You see there's actually 3 counterweights at the bottom, right at the end of the thing there.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
So it weighs a ton. So
yeah.
Yet it's my grab and go scope, right? So but no, the one I bought the mirror for, I'm still working on. It's gone through a few redesigns. It's kind of a prototype, so it's still being redesigned a little bit. It's a good visual scope right now, but it's a little cumbersome to carry around. So plus I want to just set this thing to start taking pictures and go sit in the ward room and drink coffee. So you can't do that with that one.
Yeah, nice scope.
Yeah, it's pretty. Seems to be working good now. So I've added a computer. The computer sits on Sure again. This is a Facebook, obviously the RASC Facebook site, but I added this is a Raspberry Pi with a 250 gig SSD drive on it for pictures. This is a USB hub. Everything plugs into that, but the computer basically controls the mount, and it's all wireless, right? So your user interface looks like this on an iPad or an Android. One of the two. I've got both. So you can basically, if you want to take a picture, you hit the camera icon and you tell it take a picture. But I use it. There's another interface that you can connect to the computer and set up sequences so that you can say, okay, do a mosaic of the Pleiades, and it'll just go off and do a mosaic of the Pleiades. So it's pretty robotic.
That's amazing. Wow. Did you get software for that runs on the Pi?
Yeah, it's K-Stars and ECOS. It's the same software I use all the time. So it's open source. It's the software I demoed in my observatory way back when.
Right, I remember that.
Yeah, it's all the same software, except now there's the new thing is the iPad interface, which is really you can use it on your phone too, except everything's super tiny. Yeah. But on an iPad, it's a nice interface, but the powerful interface is still running on the Pi. The iPad stuff is just like a screen scrape of what's running on the Pi. So, but it's kind of cool. People like it's like the EV scope stuff, right? People like the simplified user interfaces. So, so we'll see how it works. Sorry to monopolize the conversation.
That's fine.
Has anybody ever tried these 2x54 ultra wides things? Or I guess it's not coming through properly here. I found an Orion 2x54 binoculars. It has like a 36-degree field of view. You ever heard of those, or anybody experienced them?
2x54? Oh, ultra wide.
2x54 ultra wide. Yeah, it's a 36-degree field of view. Sort of came across my radar, and I was like, "This sounds interesting," but I wasn't sure if anybody had even heard of it or had any.
It's
well,
like
54 millimeter aperture is pretty good. Like that's a decent aperture for seeing more than your naked eye will. That's for sure.
And you're getting 36 degrees field of view out of it too. So you're basically looking at.
Definitely make it easier to spot things. I find when I'm using my 15x70s, I have to figure out where the heck in the sky I am when I'm looking through them. Just trying to identify anything familiar. It's almost like I need a finder scope for my binoculars.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need Jerry laser pointing it in the sky, and then you follow the laser pointer, right?
Like, you know, when we're doing that binocular tour at Spruce Woods, like, I guess I just got to learn how to use my binoculars better, because I was missing his laser pointer like probably 25% of the time. Like I couldn't even see where it's pointing. But I guess that comes with practice.
Yeah, it's practice makes perfect. It's, you have to set your expectations that it's a learned skill, right? Yeah. It's kind of funny when you do observing events for the public. I remember in 2002 we did Mars Mania, and we had like 1,000 people show up at Birds Hill Park to look at Mars through our telescopes, and people would look it through and go, oh, yeah, oh, very nice, okay, yeah, that's really cool. And then you've realized that Mars has drifted out of the field, and they're looking at a black field in their eyepiece, right?
Oh man, yeah, you've just turned off a bunch of people. I'm not interested in astronomy. I'm just
this is boring. Well, then again, Mars, the thing about Mars, well, any planet, you got to look at it for a while before you see anything, right? So people take a quick glance and they see an orange blotch, right? And probably all out of focus and stuff from seeing. And then they go, oh, okay, this isn't anything like the pictures I see on the internet.
Yeah, well, I had a friend come